Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. It is Monday. It is Easter Monday of all times. So happy Easter to anyone that effectively celebrates it. The Pope has just died. I don't know if that is indicative of anything, that he dropped dead day after Easter. It's just kind of strange. It put me in the mind of, what is her name? What is her name? Is it Liz Truss that was in the UK and then the Queen died like the day after the election or something like that? I was there, by the way. I was covering it for the network, just pointing out. But yeah, it's strange. I remember, I'll give my own memory of the Pope since we have a few minutes. They're doing construction upstairs. It's freaking me out. And so I'm going to let the guests do the overwhelming majority of the talking and put myself on mute just in case I don't want that banging and everything else to translate. I remember my ex-wife and I being in Italy and randomly showing up at the Vatican. We didn't even know what it was. We were just walking with the flow of the crowd. And I remember he comes out that little window and he gives a speech. And everybody who was just kind of talking in just immediately fixated in that one little spot, almost like in unison, as if something was going on in everybody's heads. It was a strangely compelling event, considering I'm not Catholic. There's a weird energy about it when you get that many people in unison that are focused in that particular way on a very specific thing, as the thing that the person is saying. No clue what he's saying. He's speaking in Italian. This was a decent Pope. Don't know what to say. The Pope is dead. The Pope is dead. They will choose a new one, I imagine. But this one was a lefty and had no issue pointing out those issues when he was to the left on. So condolences to anybody who's Catholic, condolences to anybody that really cares, and condolences to the people who, he's close to, right? This person, regardless of his title, he's a person. And he dropped it like everybody else, like everybody here in the chat, like me, all of us ghosts. Yeah, there's that. So, interesting news. Oh, by the way, no, I did not go for a bong. I am free of pot for like a good month, if not, be a month and 2 days. I would explain that at a later date. But no, there's no bong here. There's no bong thing. They're literally doing construction upstairs. All morning, it was bang, bang, bang. I was like, and I hit my, the host. I was like, hey, how long is this going to last? I have a show at 1 o'clock. It seems like it has calmed down. I don't know if my host effectively told him to shut the hell up. I don't know. Either way, shout out to him. If he did, he is going to get a hell of a rating from me. He may even get a tip. I don't think I've ever tipped anybody on Airbnb. He's been fantastic. But welcome to the show. What I like to call the best damn morning show. Pretty much anywhere, doing news, politics, domestic, international. That is what we do here. I get the sense that you guys don't care that much about the domestic, or maybe I don't do the stories well enough. When a show does poorly, I just kind of blame myself, regardless of who the person is. But either way we look at it, interesting things are going on around the world and going on right now. Shout out to the chat for being here this early in the morning to hear me talk about this kind of complicated. I would say some people would consider it dry because they're not necessarily interested. I don't think it's dry in the least. This thing has world implications going forward into the future. The trade war with China is not simmering down, and if anything, it is just escalating. China has returned a slew of Boeing orders, like hundreds of them. They stopped buying LNG from the United States. And they point out, all right, the U.S. cannot take us in a trade war by itself. Fair enough. That is something by itself, right? Like, think about what we're saying. Before I show this, think about what we're saying here. What time is it? Okay, we have time. The U.S. starts the trade war. Trump stumbles into it. He stumbles into it with the assumption that he has the power to bend every other country around the world to his will, meaning one country representing 5% of the globe stands up, shaking his fist to the world and saying, "No, the facade." Trump. Some do. China says F off. Now, if this was 20 years ago, do you think they would have said F off? And yet they do now. And not just do now, continuously escalates, escalates, escalates. Even when Trump pulled back on electronics, they were continuing to escalate. And they said, we're in this to the bitter end. We've been here for 5,000 years, and we will be here for 5,000 more as you fall apart as a basket case of a country. That was their point of view. That is what they was going with. And as I said, continued to escalate. It became clear that Donald Trump didn't have the capability alone as one singular country to win. So Trump starts going to people that he's been browbeating and insulting for the last 2 months, 3 months, however long he's been in office, and say, hey, I need you to work with us. And if you work with us, we will give you inducements. So we will give you tariff relief and some kind of inducement if you work with us to isolate China. Basically, we need to gang up on China. They're too big. We can't stop them by ourselves. Okay, but you stumbled into this. Nobody else did this. You did. It says something that the U.S. is incapable of doing what it could do 20, 30 years ago. All right. China, for its part, responding to this, says, look, any country that goes along with this, we will retaliate against. China has issued a stern warning regarding the nations engaging in trade agreements with the United States that adversely affect its economic interests. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has stated that it will firmly oppose any deals and is prepared to implement countermeasures against countries that proceed. This development escalates tensions in the ongoing U.S.-China trade war, influencing global trade partners. If you come after us, we will come after you too. Come on, there we are. That is what will take place. Now, it is believed that we would lose this. China has been making relationships all around the world immediately as this started. So Foreign Minister Wang Yi comes out and says, effectively, Asian countries are with us. We have been able to unite Southeast Asia in order to push back on Trump and stand in unison against him on this. Now, this is in a different language. The thing is at the bottom. But effectively, the U.S. is launching a trade war. It's abusing tariffs, ignoring all international rules and the basic principles of trade. We have unified the Southeast Asian countries to effectively stand against them. All right. Now, I want to add to this, China trying to get a trade deal with Europe, where they have sent envoys to Europe to say, hey, he's treating you poorly, right? Why don't you work with us? Why don't you work with us? Why don't we make deals? And Europe is supposed to go to China, if I remember correctly, also. So the transatlantic relationship that the U.S. would have typically depended upon is flirting with China at a time when Donald Trump, who started a trade war, needs them the most. This is, again, when I say, like some people may consider themselves dry, I don't think this is dry. I consider all of these things to be canaries in a coal mine. You don't have the abilities that you had 20, 30 years ago. And you could say hysterics, you could say arrogance, mendacity, all of these things have now come to fruition in a zero-sum trade match against a country that under normal circumstances believes in win-win relationships. It is amazing. It is amazing. That's one bit of news. The other bit of news has to do with, let's go to Iran first. So I got something wrong. I think I said the talks were in Oman. They were in Oman the first time. They were in Rome this time. For some reason, I thought they changed, but I got it wrong. So the U.S.-Iran delegation shows up. There we are. This is them heading out of the negotiations. Now, it was said by, I think, the Iranian foreign minister, I think it's Abbas Araghchi, that there is nothing to be optimistic about or pessimistic about, that they went fine. The U.S. is also saying they went fine. They are going to have additional talks next week. These talks, from my understanding, have more to do with nailing down red lines. It's almost like they're taking step by step by step. Now, I spoke to an Iranian inspector. That video, or F-Skype, it deleted our interview. But one of the things he said is that Arghachi wrote the book on negotiations and this idea of dragging out negotiations for maximum effect of those negotiations. The problem with that in this case is Donald Trump put a timescale around those negotiations. Now, if he is bluffing, but I don't think he's bluffing, he has a cabinet full of Zionists. These people are lunatics. Israel wants to attack with the idea that the U.S. is going to help. So all of these things that they effectively have their hooks, and Donald Trump are telling him to go. And his instincts are like, this is going to be a catastrophe. Maybe there's a way out. Maybe that's what his instincts are telling him. Again, I don't know in his mind, but he said, Witkoff. All right. In the context of red lines, Iran is saying, we're only talking about nuclear options, meaning nuclear stuff concerning weapons. The Bloomberg is reporting that Donald Trump is giving a realistic, let's say, offer. Now, I don't know what realistic means in the Trump lexicon. If it's what Witkoff said the first time, if you remember, Witkoff went on Fox News, I believe it was Sean Hannity, and he says something to the effect of, yes, we're having discussions, negotiations. We're talking about bringing the nuclear, the amount they're able to enrich to 3.6%, something to that effect. And then people on the right freaked out and says, oh my God, a bunch of Zionists, oh my God, we're supposed to get rid of all of their nuclear material, and this is a betrayal. Witkoff comes out on Twitter and was like, this is going to be a Trump deal. We're going to do what we do to get rid of all, blah, 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 blah. Which one do you believe? Who knows? The Iranians seem to believe the first one. The first one. Now, in a conversation about red lines, they spoke for 4 hours. So nobody threw a table over. Nobody threw a chair. Nobody got up and stormed out. They spoke for 4 hours, which means that at the very least, they didn't go catastrophically bad, even if they're trying to put face of something else on it. And considering they're moving the technical details, they may have gone decent, meaning there's still things to talk about. So this is the negotiations. Give me 1 second, Andrii. Israel is saying, we don't really care what Trump thinks. And they have gone so far as to consider a strike on Iran, rebuffing what Donald Trump is saying. If I could find the article right here. Right here. Now, I would tell you that this article doesn't entirely make sense. It doesn't entirely make sense. And the reason it doesn't entirely make sense is because they still require the U.S. help, even for that strike. So how are you doing the strike where you're blowing off the U.S. if you still need our help in the strike? We can talk about it at a later time. I want to bring on my guests. I'm happy to have him, and I do not like my guests having to wait. I know I feel some kind of way about it when it happens to me, so I imagine it feels some kind of way about it when it happens to him. We are joined. There we are. We're joined with Andrii Telizhenko. He's a Ukrainian whistleblower, former diplomat for the country. Welcome to the show, my man. How you doing?
Hi, Jamal. I'm happy to wait. It's always interesting to listen to what you're saying, so I will just listen to what you're saying. So no problem.
You're being,
Happy
you're being
Easter
too
to
polite.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you, man. Happy Easter back at you. You're being too polite. I hate waiting on the show. Very rarely am I listening and be like, okay, this is fascinating to me. It's like I just want to get out. Welcome to the show, man. It's been a while. And it's been a while because my phone has been damaged. I finally got a new one. It's here. It's working. I've got my contacts. And so you were one of the first people that I hit up. Thank you for joining me. Last week, I would have contacted you last week when it happened, and I didn't have the ability to do so. So I'm going to talk about it now. Zelensky has declared martial law. He has extended his martial law. So he says, we need another 90 days of martial law. Now, this is pretty rich, considering that the country at this point is illegitimate. And in the case of his illegitimacy, still maintains this kind of iron grip not just on power per se, but also putting political enemies in prison. He is very, he has no consideration of ending the conflict, right? And so any deal that Trump even comes up with, it's going to be denied out of hand. And to make it even weirder, and maybe weirder is not the word for it, he seems to be doing a separate track of negotiations with the Europeans. So you have one track where Donald Trump is working with this thing of, okay, let's get a deal. And what do we need to do to get a deal? And so going with this kind of realistic vision of how do we end this conflict? And then you get him working with the Europeans, effectively saying, how do we keep this going and get Europeans killed in the process if indeed they want to put peacekeepers in? Trump has said no NATO. In fact, what's funny, Trump was asked about peacekeepers in Europe. And what's interesting about this conversation is not what he says, is what he doesn't say. Meaning he's like, hey, I love peacekeepers. I love them. I love them. He never said America was backing them. So if you go in, you're going alone. This is not the U.S. coming to your rescue. I'm fascinated about all this. Give me your take on the martial law declaration. I am like Poroshenko, and one last statement. Poroshenko came out and said, this is outrageous. The country needs to be able to vote on a leader, considering we're in the middle of negotiations. Basically, the country needs a referendum of sorts. And the vote, in this case, is the referendum. And by him declaring martial law, he is avoiding the country from being able to come to a conclusion of, okay, what do you want? Whose vision do you have? Do you have Zelensky's vision of continuing the war where you're now dragging in kids, women, or do you have another vision where you want to end it? Which one do you have? And Zelensky is preventing the country from making that choice. Give me your take on this. And there's something else I want to hit you with, by the way, but give me your take on
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Before we start, first of all, my condolences to all the Catholics in the world who today Pope Francis left us. So I think he was a peacekeeper. He wanted peace between Russia and Ukraine. So that's why I really cherish people like him, because there's not a lot of them in the world who actually could speak out and say Ukrainians and Russians are brothers, which we are. So my condolences to all the Catholics out there in the world today. And bring back to your question, as martial law, Poroshenko, all that nonsense. Where was Poroshenko all these last 3 years with martial law when he was sitting there quietly because the West told him to sit there quietly? Now he's coming out and speaking out, saying it's a dictatorship, etc. Because he's being bad. He's actually being politically destroyed right now by Zelensky. Zelensky's following him actually with prosecution cases and political cases and sanctions against Poroshenko. So now he's not quiet. Now he has to come up and say that he's a politician and remind everybody that Ukraine is under a dictatorship. So he was not there for the last 3 years. Poroshenko was not there to make peace the last 3 years. He was not there when the Minsk agreements, which he signed, he implemented. So now he's speaking out, just politics. The West is pushing him to work this politics in Ukraine. So that's what it is. And what Zelensky is moving with this so-called deal with peacekeepers, etc. What peacekeepers? The only authority that has international peacekeeping organization is the United Nations. Everybody else, boots on the ground in Ukraine, will have, it's going to be foreign boots on Ukrainian soil, which is going to be not peacekeepers, but involvement in this conflict, involvement in this war today, which is a proxy war between the United States and Russia. So everybody who gets hurt from France, the UK, if they ever come in, because they were here 100 years ago in Ukraine, in 1920s and 1918, when Ukraine was in the middle of the Russian Empire falling apart, Ukraine trying to get some independence, like for 2 years, fake independence from under Polish leadership here, and then the Red Army came in. The French were here in Odessa. They fled when the Red Army came in really hard. They ran away, took out all the grain, all the food from the people, and they fled. So this is the result that's going to happen again. The problem is these guys have no authority to be in Ukraine. They have no official international authority to be in Ukraine as peacekeepers. Only the United Nations and the Security Council of the United Nations can vote on this. That's one thing. Second, with what Zelensky is prolonging and basically keeping Ukraine and with closed borders, with having the men we sent to the war zone like dogs and women now and children. We're seeing videos from Deutsche Welle how children of 13, 12 years old are being taught how to shoot, how to kill Russians on the ground. This is not even a Nazi state. This is already a terrorist state.
Yeah,
Remember the Al Qaeda movie scenes, and when they were showing them how the children were being taught in the Afghan deserts how to shoot Americans and the Soviets. This is what again. This is what it is. The West brought itself another enemy, which they basically made. They made this Nazi Bandera Zelensky regime, which now has become a terrorist regime, and keeping Ukrainians prisoners with prolonging with this martial law on Ukrainian territory because nobody can leave, no elections can happen, war is continuing, even though there's no official war between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky and the parliament of Ukraine never announced an official war between Russia and Ukraine. So this is just a conflict happening on Ukrainian soil with the help and support of the West. And why is Zelensky going to the Europeans? Because he thinks they might be able to push the continuation of this war, and he can say no to Trump. Because the globalists are now in London and Brussels and Paris, and now they're trying to push the continuation of this war. We talked about this months ago, before even the elections, that if Trump when Trump wins, and he will push a peace deal, Zelensky will try to denounce this peace deal, sabotage this peace deal, and go to the Europeans and have the Europeans finance this war. Yeah, it's not going to be this as it is right now in this mass scale, but it's going to be a guerrilla warfare. That's what the Europeans are going to go for in Ukraine. A guerrilla warfare, a Somalia, a terrorist state in the heart of Europe with the support of their money, which they're falling apart. The European economy is in recession in some countries. Germany and France, it's below zero. It's recession mode. That's it. That's what the reality is. The United States, Trump wants peace. They have, they put out statements about what peace they want, but it's a first step. Maybe nobody will agree. Not all parties will agree on everything, but this is a first step where people will start agreeing upon something and moving forward between each other.
I was just going to say real quick. Trump is scatterbrained, and he doesn't seem to have the ability for longevity. So under normal circumstances, a deal like this will take a while to work out because it's not just about Ukraine. Ukraine is a symbol, this expansion of NATO, this notion of Western encroachment, this disregard for Russian interests. Like it's a symbol for all of those things. And so solving the war, you have to solve those things too. And Trump is like, I need it done by next week, or I need it to see that we're going to make progress by next week. And it's like, dude, how are you saying you're trying to find progress next week? You just got in office. You've just really started negotiations. And they've all said, we've made positive steps. If you made positive steps, you got to give it a little bit of time. Why do you think he's pressing it so much in this way?
First of all, I think there's a lot of people around him that are trying to push the blanket onto themselves, saying, we're going to make it happen. Secretary of State Rubio, with all respect to him, his route is China, Asia. He should work on that route. But he's trying to get Ukraine and say, I made a peace deal on Ukraine. I was the one responsible for it. And like all that kind of stuff. Politics and people around, the world leaders like Donald Trump, they're trying to say that they did it. Trump needs to understand this war is the U.S. and Russia, and he understands that. I understand that the United States wants to save its face in this war also, first of all, because they cannot just leave like they did Afghanistan. It's going to be a total failure. Because with all the history of Vietnam, also U.S. fleeing Vietnam. So this is the same thing that's happening in Ukraine. But that's why they're trying to make a deal and try to work something out. And so the U.S. will look powerful in this situation, but they're keeping their hand on the pulse. But at the same time, Trump needs to understand he needs to leave Ukraine. For him to make peace in Ukraine, if he gets involved in this more and more, and we talked about this also, he needs to get all the intel agencies out of Ukraine. There's 16 of them on Ukrainian soil working, and we're preparing this war and are making money on this war and sabotaging basically the orders of the president of the United States for peace. And he needs to have them leave Ukraine. Executive order, I don't know, whatever needs to happen. They need to leave Ukraine. Change the ambassador. Thank God they're already in process of doing that. Change the embassy. Leave the diplomatic corps loyal to him in Ukraine. People put loyal people who he listens to, who understand Ukraine, put them on the ground in Ukraine, and that is the maximum the U.S. can do. Everything else, Soros money, financial State Department, all those grants, all those CIA, NSA, military intelligence, they should get out of Ukraine. All those foreign nationals fighting for Ukraine, U.S. citizens, they should leave Ukraine. That's when peace is going to happen. Russians and Ukrainians, after that, we're going to fall really fast. His days are numbered. And after he falls, somebody else will come to power, and a neutral as government, or somebody who will be in the middle, who will make a peace deal with Russia, and then open the borders and this basically atrocities in Ukraine, political atrocities against its own people. Open the borders, let people vote, have elections, and we will make a peace deal with Russians on our own, which will be faster and easier to make because we understand each other much better than the U.S. is going to push its own interests. I understand the U.S. is trying to maneuver, use Ukraine for leverage in negotiations. That's understandable. Ukraine lost sovereignty. We have nothing to complain about. Like I'm going to complain about it because I'm always against it all the time. But those are the ones who are in Kiev today. They have nothing to complain about. They understand what they were doing with this war. They lost their sovereignty. Now the U.S. is using Ukraine for its negotiations with Russia to make a better deal all over the world. Because it's not only about Ukraine. It's about Arctic, the Latin America, Iran, Middle East, Asia, everything else. Ukraine is a big part of it, but it's a part, not just the main, not the main piece. It's not the steak. It's a salad or it's a soda on the side. That's what Ukraine is on this table. So this we have to understand. And but if Trump really wants peace, and he after he makes a deal with Russia on what he needs to make a deal with, and I would want him, and what I would want to see, and it would be easier for him to make peace, leave Ukraine, get out of Ukraine in a way that is manageable for the U.S., but don't stay there. As long as the CIA stays in Ukraine, or the intel groups, or the military intelligence, they were going to sabotage any peace arrangement between Trump and Russia. And that's going to make it worse for the United States because these guys want war. They want to make money in this war. They were making money before Trump came to power on this war. Yeah, it's not a lot of money. For them, it's billions of dollars, not trillions of dollars, where the U.S. is making deals with Russia, but it's national politics. This is people in their pockets. So
Yeah.
for them, it's a lot of money. And they're going to fight for this money until the end. They don't care about the Ukrainians dying or Russians dying or anybody else or even Americans dying. These people in the deep state in the U.S. from the mud swamp or Washington, they don't care. They're in the mud swamp in Brussels. They don't care in London. They don't care. They want to make money on this because look, UK has no military, and they're aggressively pushing to fight Russia because they don't care what's going to happen to the country. They understand that Russia's not going to attack. They understand that Putin is a cold-minded leader who's not going to use nuclear weapons against their country. So they're
Yeah.
pushing him to the end to make more money on this and to try to expand their power in Europe because it's all falling apart for them. They
Let,
lost the
let me
United States.
let me be true for a bit. There was an article that one of my guests sent me, and the article was pointing out that the Trump administration and Putin, there were talks, kind of like behind the scenes, on a third party candidate to create a unity government in Ukraine. I am looking for that article for the life of me. I cannot find that article. This took place a few weeks ago. And they were effectively saying they have ideas on who they may be able to both agree upon in regards to that leadership position. It's something you just said that I think is super interesting. So yesterday, Friday, Rubio, I think, probably scared the hell out of European allies and maybe even Zelensky's people when he said this. This is what Rubio says. And when Rubio said this, I said to myself, I said on air, I said, Rubio would not say this if Trump didn't tell him to say it. This is what he says.
So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about a matter of days, whether or not this is doable in over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well.
All right. Now to Trump. Wow, they started back to banging again. All right. So this is Trump effectively echoing what Rubio just said. Okay, StreamYard is being weird. Give me 1 second. It shows this video. For some reason, it's not sharing the video. Hold on. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Trump is effectively echoing what Rubio says here for the show. God damn it.
For some reason, one of the two parties makes it very difficult. We're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass. But hopefully, we won't have to do that. And Marco is right in saying we want to see it end. Think of it. Every day, a lot of people are being killed as we talk about, as they play games. So we're not gonna take that, and we'll see. I think we have a good chance of solving the problem, however.
Are you prepared to walk away completely from these efforts and these talks?
Well, I don't want to say that, but we want to see it end.
They're doing construction upstairs. I'm sorry, Andrii. I'm sorry, audience. I don't have any power over that. This is deeply frustrating. Give me a take on that. Is that the point? Let it collapse because he doesn't believe Europe or Zelensky would even sign a deal.
I think it's the U.S. is trying to, as Trump made the greatest effort in the last years with the U.S. politics globally to make peace right now in Ukraine. He wanted to make peace in his first term. He didn't. He was trying to meet with Putin, and remember all those meetings where with the impeachment on the side, Trump and Putin trying to negotiate, so this war would never happen. The Democrats, the deep state, never let him do that. So for him right now, he understands they're going to go right now. They're negotiating with Russia. They're going to negotiate what they need to negotiate with Russia on everything else. If Ukraine's going to be left alone on the side, they're going to continue negotiating with Russia on what they need to on our take on Latin America and Asia, but Ukraine's going to be left aside. If this sabotage by the Europeans, by Zelensky continues, because everybody understands Zelensky and the Europeans will not be able to continue this war without the U.S. support. Thank God the U.S. is not giving more finances for this war at this time, and Trump and Speaker Johnson announced about this, that the U.S. is never going to vote for any more financial aid to Ukraine, because this money, first of all, is getting stolen. Second of all, it's leading to bloodshed, but nobody's winning. There's no win situation for the West in this right now. Russia has the priority on the ground. They're moving in fast. They're moving forward really, really fast in the south and the north. If they need to move in faster, they will. The problem is they're just, as Trump said, they're trying to save people's lives. They don't want to destroy everything. Like it's right now, total destruction in Gaza and Palestine. So this is right now. If the U.S. does this, and at one point and leaves Ukraine alone, I think it will be for the good sake of Ukraine that it's going to be left alone. So for Zelensky, because he'll have to flee. He would have to flee Ukraine because he will have no support of the West. The Europeans, yes, it's support, but the people inside Ukraine will eat him alive, the politicians. And we spoke about a neutral candidate. I spoke about this also a couple of weeks ago with, I think, on your show and also on Rick Sanchez's show about Timoshenko being as the person who can be the neutral candidate for the time being before the elections happen, after Zelensky flees Ukraine. But that's the case that has been talked on the table. So this may be a whole deal path for Trump administration to let Zelensky understand that he's going to be alone, and he will be alone in this. And I think that's what's going to happen. If Zelensky will not agree to the peace deal what Trump wants, he will be left alone, and Zelensky will have to flee Ukraine after that within the next couple of weeks.
This right here. One second. I'm sorry. There was no announcement that they were going to be doing that. I'm sorry.
No
I want to get your take on this, and I want to get your take on. There was another piece in the New York Times where they effectively said that part of Russia's that they wanted was denazification, and they interpreted that as getting rid of Zelensky. And they're effectively, this is what Trump is effectively offering. Look, 5 regions, go to Russia, no NATO, period. I guess the question becomes, Europe is doing something different. And it's almost as if Europe is trying to kill whatever deal Trump is trying to get. And they're trying to kill that deal. It seems that Trump is like, okay, They're not going to sign on. Zelensky's not going to sign on. I'm willing to walk and let it collapse.
Look, we have to understand that the Europeans, for them, this war is a savior for all those global elites that are in power. They can use this war to have an enemy that they use, like Russia. That this is an enemy that we continue this war. We have an enemy that's going to work inside Europe. We have to fight this enemy. We need to stay in power. We, the globalists, etc., etc. As soon as this war ends, they have nothing to work upon. Their economy is in full recession. I'm talking about largest countries like Germany and France. So they have nothing to hold on to. So they need this war to hold on to power, the same as Zelensky. They have the same puppeteers as Zelensky had, the globalists, the deep state, Macron, Merz, Starmer, Zelensky. They have the same people who own them from the globalist rule. So this is unfortunately the situation. That's why the globalists need to continue this war, because they need this enemy Russia. They're trying to use this war to make money on this war, try to stay in power for their people to stay in power around Europe. Because when this war ends, Europe is going to start falling apart. The
I
EU,
think Europe is already
NATO.
sort of falling apart. I mean,
It
the fact
is,
that
but
Marine Le
please,
Pen gets into
please,
the position, Gergescu, the AfD in Germany, these people were radioactive like 10
yeah.
years ago, 5 years ago.
But it is, I'm saying physically may fall apart. And that's what they are all afraid of. Look at Slovakia, Hungary. They might leave EU and NATO. Turkey might leave NATO after this conflict because NATO is useless in the situation. They showed the aggressiveness of NATO, not just a safety organization, security organization, but it's an aggressive military organization. And if Turkey leaves and Hungary leaves and Slovakia leaves, it's done, finished. It's all going to just crumble. So this is what it's going to lead to. That's what they're still trying to hold on to this war. Second of all, Zelensky right now, he's done. He's illegitimate. He's done as a president, and the West understands this, so they cannot deal with him right now at this point. So right now, what Europe wants, they just don't want to end this war. They want to keep coming to Ukraine, use Ukraine territory, divide it into their own parts, and have control over those parts. We saw those maps where France, UK, Germany wanted to take over different parts of Ukraine. They don't want Russia to come in there and have those territories, even though it's Russian territory. Ukraine was part of Russia for more than 350 years, and plus more than 1,000-year history of of us being one nation, one people before. So we have a total history backing us up with all this, with Ukraine and Russia, and they don't want this to happen. Russia is not just invading Ukraine; they're fleeing. They're freeing those people, because those people were Russian speakers who go to the church, the Russian church. We have our patriarch, like the Pope is sitting in Vatican for the whole world. Our patriarch is sitting in Moscow. Historically, that was the case. We had our patriarch in Kiev 1,000 years ago. He fled to Moscow after one of his right-hand man got killed 1,000 years ago, and he fled to Moscow. Since then, he's there. That's historically how he was. This is our history. This is our church. We cannot have a different church made by Hillary Clinton, Pompeo, the OC church, which is right now in Ukraine, so trying to be a division between real Orthodox and the people who were bought off. So this is what Ukraine is. They're trying to destroy Ukraine from within, make it a Somalia, use it to make more money, sell weapons, organs, human trafficking. That's what they did in Latin America. This is what they're doing today in Ukraine. But we will never let that happen. Kiev should also be freed and also all denazified from everything else, because people like me and other people who want peace, want to live just in normal Ukraine, normal life, they cannot come back because we're going to get killed by the Nazis on the ground in Ukraine. We cannot go to our church if we even come back to Ukraine, because not only are we going to get killed, we won't be even let into our church because it's being right now destroyed by the Kiev Zelensky regime. It's closed down. Churches have been captured and closed down. They're not even used. I cannot go to our holy place. That's the situation on the ground in Ukraine. I cannot buy a Russian book by Lev Tolstoy, War and Peace, because it's banned in Ukraine, but you can buy Mein Kampf in Kiev. That's what the situation on the ground is. That's what they need to understand what's happening under Zelensky, Poroshenko, and all that crowd. They made it happen. They made a Nazi Ukraine together with Newland, Clinton's, Pompeo's, the CIA, and the U.S. military intelligence. And this needs to stop. And Trump can stop it really fast. and people can stop dying really fast. And I believe in Trump that he can do it.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something else while I have a moment before. God, this is frustrating to me. It's so like nobody's business. This clip about the mineral deal. Give me your take on this deal. I feel like this is effectively rape. And I know some people may take issue with it. He is effectively trying to take all of these resources, almost as if Ukraine is a colony. I'm going to play this.
Well, we have a minerals deal, which I guess is going to be signed on Thursday, Scott, next Thursday, soon. And I assume they're going to live up to the deal, so we'll see. But we have a deal on that. No, I have no comment on that. I have no idea. That's
The first time this went through, there was a freak out in the White House by Zelensky. But Trump is saying, you owe me $100 billion. They've lowered the amount, but he's effectively getting control of all of the resources, even though they're calling it a mineral deal. Is that really okay? Like, are you really, like, as a Ukrainian, looking at that, do you look at that and think to yourself, hey, that's a great deal? Or do you look at it as Donald Trump is trying to take advantage, almost in the way a mob is trying to take advantage?
No, you have to understand, I'm not trying to protect Trump, even though I support him, or trying to save Zelensky and everybody else. Look, Ukraine sold off long before this mineral deal. Ukraine sold out to BlackRock, to the deep state 10 years ago when the coup in Maidan happened, the second coup. The first coup happened in 2004. That's when it half partially sold out. Then, 10 years ago, it totally sold out. The elites, everything else in Ukraine. I was there. I was in the government. I was after Maidan. I came in. I saw how it happened. So today, to whine that Ukraine is being milked by somebody in Washington, it was understandable that's going to happen. The United States, I'm saying its face. Unfortunately, Ukraine has no sovereignty.
I know,
Ukraine
but I agree with you. But I feel like they were pushed into this war.
Ukraine was used. The elites sold out in Ukraine. I remember talking to people like Poroshenko, people who were head of intelligence of Ukraine. They were looking how to sell off to the Americans, looking to get a U.S. passport and sell off to the Americans. This is people in the U.S. Ukraine government who had millions of dollars and were looking how to sell off, not to use that money to save Ukraine, which they stole from Ukraine, but use that money to lure it out of the country, save themselves, save their families, use Ukraine into this war, and now they're going to complain that Trump wants to take something from them. And we talked about this. Ukraine having this deal on the table needs to understand that Trump needs to save America's face in this, right? Ukraine should have done, if it was a sovereign, independent state with a mind, not a clown in the head of state, and people who are not sold out to the British intelligence or to the West, like Yermak and everybody else, and not on cocaine, would have done. So look, this is what U.S. is offering us. We cannot get that deal. We understand we're not sovereign. We cannot do anything right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to negotiate with Moscow. Let them renegotiate the deal on the minerals with Washington, because they have what if they can offer anything with the U.S. We'll make a peace deal with Russia. We will basically become a neutral state. What Russia wants, nothing bad about it. Russia will basically have investments from the U.S. in Ukraine, partially. Russia will have investments with the U.S. and Russia in their territory with the minerals. And they will renegotiate. Russia was happy to negotiate those deals. Kirill Dmitriev was talking about this, that they're open to negotiate mineral deals with the United States. So we could have at least more than half of that $100 billion deal or $300 billion deal. We could have renegotiated for Russia and made it work for us and make it happen. And then we'd make a deal with Russia. We'll make a deal with the U.S. and everybody will be happy. That's what it was all about. It was the art of a deal. You cannot just look at this straightforward and this is just one path. No, it's different little path. You can take each one of them. It's politics. It's diplomacy. It's different checkboards around the table. You're playing all at the same time. That's what you have to understand. But the people in Ukraine, I'm sorry, they're dumb. They're dumb, stupid. They're not sovereign. They're not thinking about their country. If they were thinking about their country, this war would have never happened, and they would stop this war when Trump would become president. But they didn't. They're not thinking straight. And I'm just saying, this is one of the possibilities to have saved Ukraine and not lured fully into this deal with the United States, like completely give it out. was a path to renegotiate with Russia, and we would be 50-50 or even 70 or 30, something. We would have good deals happen, and Trump would be happy, I think, in all this, any case, if we would have done that also, because we'd have peace. He was the one who brought peace into Ukraine. He would have saved his face by getting some money out of Ukraine and Russia for this war. And Ukraine would not look as stupid as it is right now, but as being the state that lost. But it is the state that lost. It's like Nazi Germany in 1945. It's being divided. But the problem is Ukraine still had a chance to negotiate. It didn't pick up a phone and call Putin.
Would the Rada even ratify this deal? Like, would the Rada accept this deal that Trump is doing? I mean, look, I'm just saying, all resources of Ukraine, oil, gas, minerals, paying back $100 billion that the U.S. effectively invested in order to use Ukraine as a battering ram. And then Trump comes in and says, all right, I want my money back.
Rada verified and basically supported a deal that was sell off land, which is owned by the Constitution by Ukrainians, to foreigners. So this they're going to do also. Because everybody in that Rada, they want to save their life. And they're going to go to Brussels, London, and to Washington. And they're the ones who control the situation in Ukraine. And for the last 10 years, Brussels, London, and Washington were controlling Ukraine. Not Moscow, not Beijing. If they're the ones responsible for this war, they're the ones who were backing this war and those people there. So this is it's very simple at the same time and complicated. Problem is you have to look further, not just think about it as a conspiracy theory, because it explains everything else. I was there, I saw it from my first hand how these people were selling off. I know how these people are selling off today. They don't care about Ukraine. If they did, they would have saved Ukraine long before, like Armenia saved itself with Nagorno-Karabakh, with Azerbaijan. They understood they could not win, so why continue this war? They saved their country from bloodshed, and they gave away those territories, and now they're living peacefully. That's what Ukraine could have done, because you cannot fight a nuclear country. And with this deal with Trump, as I said, Trump, I think, pushed Ukraine to make a deal with Russia, and then with Russia make a deal with the United States on the minerals deal. But Ukraine did not support that deal. So basically, in this situation, Trump wins every time. If Russia would have made a deal for Ukraine, he would have won. If Ukraine made a deal, or was it what it's doing right now with Trump, he's going to win anyway. So it's like a win-win situation for the White House. They don't care for what's going to happen to Ukraine. Ukraine was the one who lured itself into this war. They agreed to this war by the former president and by today's illegitimate President Zelensky and dictator. So why not use it to basically get their money back? U.S. paid so much money, and that's it. I'm looking at it how America thinks. As a Ukrainian, of course, it's a tragedy. This war is a tragedy as for me as Ukraine. This Nazi terrorist regime in Ukraine is a tragedy. But this minerals deal, this giving away its resources, Ukraine did this a long time ago with BlackRock. Now they're just legitimate. They're basically renegotiating with the new administration who's going to re-own those natural minerals and resources in Ukraine today. Before it was BlackRock, now today is going to be the new White House administration.
I just find it to be, like, I can go back to William Burns' memo, for example, in 2008. And even Burns was like, if we offer Ukraine NATO membership, we're going to provoke a civil war. And they did it anyway. Like, meaning they went down a path. They knew what they were doing. They were willing to work with various groups because they had been agitating and getting those groups to be active in Ukraine in the very first place. I just find it a bit rich now that Trump is like, we want our money back. That's all. That was my main point.
It is rich, but I'm just saying you have to. I like to think about when you think about it from a perspective point of Ukraine. There's no Ukraine today. Ukraine is lost. Unfortunately, as Ukraine, I talked about it. If it was for Ukraine, we'd never have the civil war in Donbass. We would never have bombarded those people in the east of Ukraine, children. Thousands of children in Donbass were killed by Ukrainian artillery, and the world just was quiet about it. And we would have never had that. We could have had Minsk, even if we made mistakes, we could have had Minsk 1, Minsk, we could have signed those peace deals. We could have had Donbass as an autonomy. We could have had no coup in 2014, 13, 14, and have Crimea part of Ukraine. That's one thing. Second of all, Ukraine didn't do anything to keep those territories Ukrainian. Crimea, they never invested a dime into Crimea, into having Ukrainian schools being there. They didn't do anything. They didn't invest a dime to have East Ukraine like West Ukraine. They didn't do anything for that. in the last 30 years of so-called independence. Ukraine had its chance becoming an independent state, first time in so many hundred years, or more than 350 years, Ukraine got its independence. Before it was no Ukraine. It was just a part of called Hetmanshina. We had different groups of tribes running around, and they basically went under Russia back in 1654. That's what the reality is. Ukraine had a chance. It didn't use this chance. It used the chance to sell off Belarus, the same country. Look at it. It has peace. It has all the factories working. Yeah, maybe the GDP is not as in Belgium or somewhere else, but the people are happy. People are okay. People are living there. There's peace. There's no war. People are having jobs, having the factories, having everything else. Kazakhstan, between Russia and China, also peaceful, no problems. Yeah, there's some mistakes, but people are moving forward. They're developing. In Ukraine, the most prosperous land of the post-Soviet countries, didn't use this, had all the factories for making military missiles, tanks, airplanes, shipbuilding. We had everything. Everything's lost, sold out. To whom? To the West. And today, for me, I see this mineral deal as just the last, basically, drop in this so-called bad Ukraine, Nazis in Ukraine. They're the ones who made this happen on themselves. And we're going to start over from scratch. We're going to start over with a new Ukraine, whatever it's going to be. But we're going to work our way through it. That's their role. They made Ukraine be a useful idiot in the world politics and global politics. And that is the price they have to pay. Unfortunately, I cannot do anything. For the last 10 years, I fought for Ukraine. Today, this is what the reality is. I just want Trump to make peace. And then we can, for me at least, to come back to Ukraine and start over to do something. My hands are scratching just to do something good for Ukraine. Come back and start over. That's what I want to do.
Let me ask you this. Are you hopeful in these negotiations based on what you've seen up to this point?
I know they're not going to take 1 day or 24 hours. That's what I understand. It's going to take up till the end of this year. We're going to see if these negotiations are going to be workable. Even if Trump says he's going to lead these negotiations in Ukraine and there's going to be changes in Ukraine happening, the US is still going to coordinate some stuff on the side, not openly, not as an open, because diplomacy, good diplomacy, is always good behind closed doors and nobody knows about it. So that's what it has to be. And I think it's going to be until the end of the year we're going to understand what's going to happen to Ukraine. Within the next couple of months, we're going to see if Zelensky's going to be destroyed or free Ukraine, and if there's going to be a transitional government approved by both sides.
So you really do think that they're going to push him out somehow?
He is going to be pushed out. He is clinging
like grim death to that
position. He understands he's done. Because he understands as soon as he has to flee, with this mineral deal, I think he made an arrangement for himself to not be touched. He basically became untouchable if he agrees to sign this mineral deal. That's why he didn't go to Russia.
But he's trying to pass a martial law thing. I mean, if he's trying to make a deal to stay, to leave, then why did he declare martial law for 30 days?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen really fast. Everybody thinks they're going to sign a deal, and it's going to be workable. Next morning, we're going to find out Zelensky fled Ukraine, or tried to flee Ukraine. Then he got the farmers in the Western Ukraine stopped him with pitchforks, and he's done somewhere in the trenches. Whatever, something like that's going to happen. No, that's how it works out. Yanukovych, for example, during the coup in 2014, signed a deal with the Europeans, guaranteeing his security and him having re-elections. The next day, he fled Ukraine because he was pushed. That's what may happen. The same thing may happen here, but it's going to be more bloody than it was in 2014. That's the case with Zelensky, and he understands that. So I believe that very soon Zelensky will not be in power in Ukraine. Very soon, hopefully, Ukraine will start its path for peace. How much Ukraine is going to be left, or how much we're going to be with Russia, or what's going to happen is. But the main thing is that we'll have to make a deal with Russia. We have to work with Russia in the future. We were one country. We can negotiate with Russia much easily without the US and the West being involved. Bringing back normal Ukrainians, we'll sit down, a couple of weeks of negotiations. We'll bring back to the table what needs to be done. We'll have a neutral Ukraine, working with Russia, with Belarus, with all the countries in the post-Soviet bloc. We will not go into NATO. We will start building. The first thing for the people, start building their lives back. If the people can have babies back. They can go to hospitals easily. They can start building their houses back. They can have a job. The men will not have to flee the military police and can go on the streets and do their work
Normal
back.
life.
Bring
You're talking
them
about a
back.
normal life. Yeah, you're just talking
It
about
will
regular life.
start bringing back. We had a civil war between the Red and the White Army in the beginning of the 20th century. Millions of dead. Millions. There were around 10 million dead. Within the couple of years, people got their lives back together, and together we became one country, the Soviet Union, which won the Second World War. Both those people who were the white and the red who fought between each other, they got together and won the Second World War. They became united. That's what's going to happen today. We're going to be united. The problem is the globalists are afraid of that because we're going to have more power than they think they're going to lose all this power with being on the side of Russia. But bring us back our country. That's what I want.
Andrii, from your mouth to God's ears. I think this war is catastrophic. And I was, working in a radio station when it happened, and I could not believe it. I would tell you, no American thought it was going to happen. Meaning at the station, they were like, okay, this is not going to happen. And when Putin went in, we were all shocked and had to all eat crow on air saying, we did not think it was going to happen. And I had to really think to myself, okay, why? Why were all of us wrong? We're Americans. Nobody's at our gates. Nobody's at our border. Nobody's encroaching on our territory in that way. And so our point of view is skewed just by our reality in the sense. I think it's a catastrophe. It should have never happened. I feel culpable because my country was pushing for it. We had, regardless of the proxy, to me, the proxy is less relevant than the people who's using them because we're the ones that's using them to do a particular service. That's why I feel some kind of way about it, if that makes sense. From your mouth to God's ears, I hope you're right. I'm going to tell you Happy Easter. Andrii Telizhenko, he's a Ukrainian whistleblower, a former diplomat, and a good friend of the show. Thank you, Andrii, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless Jamal. All the best to you and happy Easter to everybody.
You have a good one, man. Thank you. All right. Andrii is fantastic. I am deeply frustrated about the construction that's going on upstairs. I can't do anything about it. I hit my host, asked him to schedule. Maybe I can form tomorrow's schedule around it as opposed to just barreling through it. I'm trying to put my frustrations to the side just to clear the queue and move on. Cannabis will say, can't let the circumstance stop you, right? We have a few minutes before we get to Mark. Bernie Sanders. I want to talk about Bernie Sanders. So, first, genocide. What is a genocide? What is a genocide? This is the definition. If you just put in Google, a deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or that group. Very straightforward definition. All right, let's go to the next one. Amnesty International concludes, let me make sure it's showing, yeah. Amnesty International concludes that Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. Let's go to the next one. The ICJ findings on plausible genocide in Gaza and its implications for International Criminal Court. Now, the ICC has already filed an arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Gallant, and the ICJ has given Israel 6 more months to answer for the plausible genocide thing. They rule you're committing a genocide. Let's keep going. There's more. I want to nail this down before we do anything else. Israel not complying with the court's order in a genocide case, effectively saying they're blowing off the ICJ's ruling to, hey, prevent it from being a genocide. This is today or yesterday. Oh, it didn't show. It killed. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Let's go to this one. This today, and I'm not sure if you saw the last one, so let's go to the last one first. Plausible genocide. I want you to see the headlines. I don't want to just take my word for it. Israel not complying with the court order in the genocide case. This is Human Rights Watch. Okay, good. And this one, this is taking place today. Israel is effectively bombing people in tent. Imagine being on the ground for that. Really, put yourself in a position of a human being. And this is your reality. Day in, day out, day in, day out. Depriving of water, depriving of food, intentionally doing so and admitting that they are doing so, meaning this is our policy going forward. We're going to starve this entire population, 50 to 100,000 people gone, 2/3 of which women and children. Let's keep going. So then Bernie Sanders, who, to his credit, and I'm going to give him credit for this, Sanders was the first politician that I've ever heard get on a debate stage and go after his opponent for their position on Israel, saying, we are doing horrible things in the service of this country. Hillary Clinton was his opposition, and he put a knife at her on the stage on this very specific issue. I want to give him credit for that before I show this video, because he would say his position is more nuanced. Okay, I'll let him deal with this. He gets heckled in an extreme way on this very particular issue. I'm going to play the clip, and you can see Sanders effectively can't respond to this.
A little bit queasy, what genocide? We've got to be careful about the word.
It is a genocide.
What's your definition of genocide?
Bernie, you have funded Zionism yourself. You have funded the Israeli settler state. Here you are, pretending you aren't. It is disgusting. Liar, liar, genocide denier. Liar, liar, genocide denier. It's disgusting. It is reprehensible. You are a child killer. You are a genocide denier. The United States military-industrial complex are the largest murderers in the world. It does not matter if it is a Democrat or a Republican. You have murdered people around the world. The Native Americans are still being genocided. I have never heard you once speak about genocide.
Okay. I don't know how effective that is, screaming at Bernie Sanders like that. I would imagine for the guy, it's, invigorating. Sanders has always been more squirrely on this. Obviously, he's Jewish, right? By the same token, he is, again, I want to give him credit for the Hillary Clinton thing, because I've never seen that. It is problematic, however, for them to be killing people in mass when you can watch it on social media day after day after day. And when people point out, by the literal definition of genocide, by the ICJs even looking at it saying, hey, this is a plausible genocide, by other organizations, this is a genocide. For Sanders to be like, I'm squirrely about their work. Why? Why? It is what it is, what it is. And I get why you may be squirrely about it for various reasons, but it is what it is. Now, bringing in the Native Americans doesn't help. I just got to be honest. I hate it in arguments where people are arguing about a specific thing and then they add in something else that has no bearing on the thing just because they want to add it. Well, okay, I hate that. I hate that. My ex-boss used to do that. It's like, we're talking about one item and he's bringing on something that happened like a week ago that has nothing to do with it. So it's like, okay, dude, come on. And women do that too. Men do it too. But I only know from the perspective of women and relationships. My point is this. It is problematic for Sanders to not be able to say that. And when you're looking at the Democratic Party broadly, he is further in the camp of, at the very least, being able to be calling them out for it. The rest of them can't, their position for the most part is the same as Trump. Maybe they wouldn't necessarily deport people. What they don't get, what he doesn't get, is that part of the reason that Harris lost was because of that issue. Meaning, when people are turning on Twitter, and there's so many images I can't even show you because I think they would take me off YouTube if I even tried to. Right here, if you watch this day in and day out, you're seeing all of these people getting killed, and the take of the U.S. fundamentally shifted on that issue. Meaning you have so many people that see that and say, I'm against that. And I'm against the state that's doing that. The overwhelming majority of those people are Democrats, even though you have a large number of Republicans also at this point. How do you win a race when your take is so diametrically opposed to your own base on that issue? I know Sanders is getting 40, 50,000 people at these conventions, and I know this is one guy, but the fact that that position of that one guy is effectively the position of a huge number of Democrats, many of which that stayed home. They need to evolve on this issue and evolve on this issue fast. And election after election, these people, you must understand, you get hardened in your positions on stuff like this. And if you're 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and you're seeing the way the Democrats deal with this issue that is effectively the same as Trump's dealing with this issue, you're going to harden those kids against your party, making it that much more difficult for you to get elected and shrinking the pool of voters that you can actually get. Yeah, you'll get a liberal because they'll vote for anything. If Obama kills, I'm an American, they will be okay with that. If Joe Biden is the one putting kids in cages, they will be okay with that. If Obama sets up a censorship regime, they will be okay with that. They're liberals, right? They're going to follow whatever the party says. But people like me come to the assessment that this is a genocide. And how do I vote for a party that believes in it, pushes for it, and actually defends it in front of the world? You're damaging yourself. That's my warning. You're damaging yourself. Most of those people that are being killed are children. Put that in context. If you notice, those were kids on those bicycles. The people who are living in those tents in Israel, it's taken half of Gaza with the notion of exterminating them or expelling them. There are no two other options. Two-state is a dog and pony show, and it's a shiny object. That's all. When I hear that, I tune out. Trump and Joe Biden has been shuffling around the world trying to find people, hey, who will take these people if we can expel them? With the US president openly saying, we're going to build like casinos and stuff. This is going to be beachfront property. It's going to be awesome. Okay, well, what is that? If that is not cleansing a people from a particular area, that is a genocide by definition. Nobody said there were holocausts. They were specific to the term genocide. I'm dodgy about that term. Why? You and your party have a problem with that issue. Republicans less so. But you and your party have an issue. And this is one of those things where you guys need to evolve. Now, the honest truth of it is the amount of money that they get is part and parcel to the reason that they don't. And ideologically, they probably like having their own little colony in the Middle East where you can effectively expand and create or break the cohesion between the Muslim world. I would imagine ideologically it fits. And from the standpoint of the money that they get from the Israeli lobby, it fits. The American public, not so much. Not so much. So I would just, as somebody pointed out in the chat, the Pope was against what is taking place in Israel. God bless him for it. There's a special place in heaven for him coming out on that issue. But for Sanders, nope. I would imagine he doesn't want to be called a self-hating Jew. Fair enough. But there are plenty of Jews who have come out strongly saying, this is not in my name. And by the way, as an American, me doing this show and me pointing out that war is a catastrophe, it's the same thing of me saying, this is not in my name. You're killing all of these people. You're supporting this nonsense of this war. This is not in my name. And you would get people on lines of, he's unpatriotic. It is the most patriotic thing in the world to advocate against an atrocity that your government is either assisting or committing. And that is the entire point of the First Amendment, just to point out. Sanders, do better. Do better. I get you're dodgy with the word, fair enough. Do better. I get you further on this issue than many of your your assemblymen. Do better. They are murdering people en masse with the sole point of eliminating those people either from the face of the earth or their territory. They want to take the territory and expand. That is the modus operandi. There is no third way in this case. There's no second way. There's no one state. There's no two state. In their minds, we want it all. We're going into Syria. We're going into Lebanon. We're taking all of Gaza. We're taking the West Bank. That's what we want. And if you can't honestly see that and say that, it's like, they're exterminating those people, or they're trying to get rid of them, then that is problematic. And I'm saying that's not just problematic from a moral point of view, but also from a political sense. Let me go to my guests. We're joined with the man himself. I would say the voice of wisdom and truth. He hates when I say that, but at the very least, he does a damn good job at analysis. Mark Sleboda, my man. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay?
Jamarl, thanks for having me. I'm alive. Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Happy Easter, man. There is construction upstairs that I did not know about, so I'm going to have you on mute. I'll bring myself in just to ask a question or something like that. I really thank you for joining me. I'm going to do this on air. There have been people who've helped me with this channel, and you have been one of them that have. My appreciation for you is astonishing and radical, and I just wanted to say it on air. I said it on the show. I said it to you personally, but there are several guests who stuck with me from the very beginning of the show, even through the first 2 weeks where it's just a mess, calamity. Thank you. So you have my appreciation for it.
Tomorrow, knock it off. Knock it off. We've been having this conversation for
I know,
years.
but I still appreciate it. It's hard for me to get that appreciation across because you could have on the first week be like, I'm done with this. This is a cluster. But I'm not gonna beat it around. I'm not gonna beat it around. I want to get your take on something. So Donald Trump has come out, and I'll use propaganda outlet in order to even show the story. Kiev, quote unquote, independent, comes out. U.S. proposes leaving the occupied areas under Russian control, easing sanctions. This is what Bloomberg is reporting. This is apparently what Witkoff and Rubio communicated to the Europeans. No NATO, also. The Europeans obviously were like, we don't like this. We're not for this. Yep. And even, of course, Zelensky has been flipping out, yelling that Witkoff is working with the Russians, that Vance is working with the Russians, that this is outrageous. We're never going to accept this. And there was a really interesting part in the New York Times on this, where the New York Times points out that one of the things also is the denazification of Ukraine, which they interpret as removing Zelensky. Fascinating. In fact, just saying, this is outrageous that Donald Trump is proposing this. And then I thought, this is still not enough though, right? Like, because one of the other elements is freezing the conflict. And they are not going to allow the freezing of the conflict. That's one of our red lines, right? All of these regions are ours, and the troops need to leave. Or is there wiggle room in that? Where, look, under normal circumstances, negotiations are taken with maximalist point of view and whittling your way in. From my point of view, most of Russia's demands are not maximalist. They're rational from the point of view of Russia in regards to security. Is freezing the conflict, though? Is there wiggle room in that? Freezing it across the current lines? I want to start there because that's what's being put out in regards to the Trump's offer. What are your thoughts?
I think that it is admirable that the Trump team has come to where Russia was in 2015. There's so much gulf between the positions at this point. It's almost laughable. I mean, it's just amazing that this echo chamber of Western conversation that they've been having, furiously arguing each other, whether, to recognize that Crimea is part of Russia. Full disclosure, my wife is Crimean, right? I've got family in Simferopol. They've been part of Russia officially since 2014, as far as they're concerned, and really much longer before that, right? I mean, they as far as they're concerned, they've always been Russian. So, I mean, have I told you the story of how I met my wife?
You haven't actually. I assume you were in the military or something like that.
No. I had already been out of the military, and I was working for a semiconductor company in Boston, and I was at a goth fetish nightclub that was wonderful in Boston at the time. I was a weekend goth. Yeah. Full disclosure. And I met my future wife there. She is from Crimea, from Simferopol, but she had gone to university in St. Petersburg, and she was had already gotten her Russian citizenship. Technically, she was still a Ukrainian citizen as well, although she never viewed herself that way. And we came across each other in the club, and we started talking, as one does at clubs, as such at that age. And I heard her voice, and I said, "You're from Eastern Europe somewhere, right?" And I said, "I've got Eastern European roots, my family." And she says, "Yes, I'm from Crimea." I says, "Oh, you're from Ukraine," and she slapped me across the face.
Are you serious?
Actually, I said, "You're Ukrainian." And she slapped me across the face. And it was love at first slap. And that was my first introduction to Crimean and Russian Ukrainian identity politics. And
that's fascinating.
It's been a long, long road since then. Anyway, it's of course very complicated. And my wife's own family, I mean, their surname is actually Ukrainian, right? It ends with an O. Nichitailo. And they're mixed, right? It's like most families in Eastern or former Eastern Ukraine and Western Russia. You scratch one Russian Ukrainian, it's really hard to say where one line and what is really ethnic Russian, ethnic Ukrainian in that area. It didn't mean anything in the Soviet Union, and there's question of how much it meant anything in the Romanov Empire. But her family regarded themselves as Russians, right, or as part of the Russian world, the Ruski Mir that sometimes that Russians speak about with great fondness, and the Western media tries to mean as some type of Giga Chad imperial redux idea. Her family, they regard themselves as Russians. They're Russian speaking, right? They whether they attended the Ukrainian Orthodox Church or the Russian Orthodox Church, they regarded themselves as Orthodox believers. That's they viewed Russians as at farthest a brother people removed by a modern political border that sprang up, and no one really believes in it or thinks it means anything, right? But it's there. So for the Trump administration to catch up with the Crimeans on that, much less completely ignoring, of course, the very similar opinions by the majority of the people in the Donbass, and what has become the majority, particularly since the Maidan and the conflict and 2022 began, the Russian intervention in the civil conflict, the people of Kherson and Zaporozhye feel. And that also being said, my wife's family is from Crimea, but they also have relatives. So we have relatives in Donbass, in Kharkov, in Odessa, and I can tell you that absolutely none of them, have supported what has happened in their country, right, since 2014, since the overthrow of the government that they had all elected, that Eastern and South Ukrainians had overwhelmingly elected, by an openly and unquestionably Western-backed putsch with Western politicians, including John McCain and Baroness Ashton and all these others, literally on a stage that was calling for the overthrow of the government and so forth. I mean, the fact that Yanukovych even allowed that to transpire, that's a an utter condemnation as far as they're concerned in his weakness and how far Ukraine had already fallen at that point. But how deteriorated the Ukrainian state had begun. But whatever Yanukovych was, he was corrupt, he was weak. But democracy is always, even in the U.S., they acknowledge it's a choice of a lesser of two evils, and unfortunately, in most locations, unless you're in Italy, and then it's the lesser of 118 evils. But they chose that evil to prevent the other evil that from the other side of the country, at least represented the view of Western Ukraine, from seizing power. And the tenuous state of fragility of a Ukrainian state since 91 was kept by the balancing between both the internal and the external east and west of the country, the identity, the geography, the geopolitical, right? But when it was enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution, neutrality, i.e., Ukraine could join neither NATO nor the Russian-led CSTO, that kept the peace in the country, right? Because it was called Ukraine since the end of the Soviet Union. The Ukrainian language was considered the state language, but Russian, particularly in East and South Ukraine, at least up until 2014, had widespread unacknowledged or local official status as the government language in the east and the south of the country. And even if people felt themselves as Russian in eastern Ukraine, it didn't really matter so much as long as Ukraine was neutral. That was fine. That was okay. And if they could improve their perennially terrible economic relationship, economic conditions, and hopefully reduce the rampant corruption in the country that had reigned since 91, the control of the oligarchs, the control of politics by the oligarchs, as well as the economy. If by joining the EU or moving towards joining the EU, that could be improved, well, that probably wasn't a bad thing, right? As long as that's all that it entailed. But when it became clear, right, with the events leading up to the Maidan, as the top EU officials put it, right, Ukraine had to make a civilizational choice. They had to. There could be no more gray area, no more neutral space, no more buffer between everything. Right up to Russia's border had to be subsumed into all of the Western structures, not just the EU, but NATO, because they're really just different parts of the same supraorganism. And that's when the alarm bells started going off. We already had a free trade agreement with in Ukraine with the countries of the Commonwealth of Independent States. So if we follow this EU association agreement, we're supposed to rip that up. I mean, that already started rubbing people, the wrong way. And then when they got this hundreds of pages of neoliberal diktat that was the EU association agreement, that basically called for ripping up their economy from the level down to the railroad tracks in the country and replacing them, and privatizing all of the state-owned enterprises in the country, which would have literally unemployed more than 10 million people, with no funds, no money from Europe to Ukraine to ameliorate the effects of this. Well, that's when Yanukovych said, I can't do that. I mean, no one can do that, right? No one. Not.
Well, he said he wanted a pause, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or am I getting that wrong?
What?
He called for a pause.
Yeah. He didn't say no. He basically said, we need to renegotiate. Not now, not under those conditions. It doesn't mean, but that was already, the signal. That was the government is to be overthrown then, and all of Ukraine is to be dragged kicking and screaming. And then, of course, they lustrated the party that had won the last elections in the country, right? They were denuded from the Rada, right? They were ripped out of the Rada, along with all of the leftist parties in the country, the Communist Party of Ukraine, which was still quite strong, all of the socialist parties, right? All of these were almost immediately banned and removed from politics. And what it effectively did is it absolutely silenced any vote of opposition, any to the Maidan pro-Western geopolitical project. There would be no limitation on it, because there was all of the existing opposition in the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada, was completely and immediately silenced. In 2005, there had been the Orange Revolution, right? And then there was this contested election, and they held it again, and it was really just as crooked as the first time, but more slated towards the fixing in Western Ukraine. But the ability of that new regime was still limited by all of the existing opposition representing East Ukraine in the parliament. And the next election turned around and they voted the bum out, right? And Yanukovych was fully elected. And so when they launched the Maidan, right, the revolution of dignity, as they call it, because some people get dignity and others don't. I mean, that's the beauty of that catchphrase, right? Western Ukrainians, they get dignity. Eastern Ukrainians, suck it up. You get to play along, and that is there could be no revisiting, no limitation to how radically the country would be altered geopolitically and internally, right, towards its Western side. It's the people of Ukraine that had that, let's be honest, Banderite fascist national identity of Galicia, because there was no more there was no organized or political opposition within the country to that. They were lustrated, they were banned. And when the old party of regions, within a couple of years, managed to reform itself as the opposition bloc, and it threatened to then become the most powerful party in the country, more popular than Zelensky's own Servant of the People party. Then suddenly its leader, Medvedchuk, was found guilty of treason, and eventually it and all the other parties representing East Ukraine, everything that was not a Maidan party, was then banned, right? Its leaders, all found guilty of treason and everything. So it effectively became it's not a one-party state, but it is a Maidan party state. And there would be no revisiting it. There was no other political option allowed. You could not consider, a foreign policy is, hey, why do we want to be enemies with our biggest neighbor, right? Because that even social opinion was no longer allowed in the country, even though that represented, at least half of the country. At that time. And what a lot of people don't report on is that in 2014, while all this Maidan happened, right? Oh, they overthrew the corrupt Yanukovych government and brought this new corrupt Maidan regime in, pro-Western. But how many, it's democratic, right? I mean, how many people voted for that? Oh, wait a minute. No one voted for that? It was the overthrow of the government? Well, how many people supported it, right? Well, everyone did, right? That's what they say, everyone. No, they didn't, right? And as the then American owned and very pro-Western Kiev Post, very pro-Maidan, conducted at the time, while the Maidan protests were going on during those 3 months, every month they took polls, right, by still today respected Ukrainian polling countries. And every one of those polls showed that a a majority or a plurality of the people actually opposed the Maidan protests. Now, it was a very small majority, right, or plurality. It was very close, but there's no question that there was no democratic revolution. It was the part of the country that lost the last election, seizing power and then excising the whole east of the country. And that is, what has led, to the decade of civil conflict in Ukraine, right? With, yes, Russia supporting quite obviously the Donbass, the eastern Ukraine, and quite obviously, the NATO and the West supporting the new regime that they helped install in Kiev. And that bring us right up to 2022. So for Trump, Team Trump, to catch up with 2015, well, yeah, that's quite an accomplishment, all right? But we're already a decade past that, and 3 years into a very intense and bloody war, a real conflict in Ukraine, all right? Having fought and defeated, right, what even Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, finally admitted was a U.S. proxy war on Russia in Ukraine. And Russia, has the commanding heights of that conflict. For anyone who's has the slightest amount of honesty, at this moment and going forward. And we've also heard an admission from the Trump administration that, in the opinion of U.S. intelligence, that no current or future weapons package that the U.S., that the West could provide can match Russia's military industrial production and change that Russian advantage, that Russian dominance of the battlefield. So it's nowhere near close enough, right? It's laughable, even, right? Putin has repeatedly said what they would accept, right? You have to acknowledge that not just Crimea and not just Donetsk and Lugansk, but also all of Kherson and Zaporozhye had referendums. They voted to become part of Russia. They were enshrined in the Russian constitution. And you have to not only have the Kiev regime withdraw all of its remaining troops from those territories, but the West and Kiev need to acknowledge that they are part of Russia. All of them, not just Crimea. And if you don't do that, and you don't do it soon, well, then we'll just have to, create the geopolitical space, to ensure that safety. And, we'll see then similar referendums. The choice will be given to the people of Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkov, and essentially, at the very least, all of Ukraine east of the Dnieper River.
Your point is that military will collapse at some point. And if you don't acknowledge the current scenario of these regions, then there will be more regions that end up part of the Russian Federation. That's your point. That there's
this is what Putin told a meeting of Russian industrialists and entrepreneurs, and that was obviously intended to be leaked quietly, to the West, to the Western media and to the West. It certainly was printed in papers like Kommersant and so forth across Russia. So that is quite obviously, where the Kremlin is.
Now, to be fair to Trump, I want to get your take on something else, because Trump made this statement. I think this was either Friday or something like that. He was effectively backing up what Rubio was saying in this. And this goes to something that you said earlier of, why does Russia need a ceasefire? They're winning. If they can be friends with their neighbors and get what they want, fair enough. But listen to Trump. This is a change in his rhetoric. This is not, we're going to pass sanctions, we have all this bombastic stuff. This is a different commentary.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass. But hopefully we won't have to do that. And Marco's right in saying we want to see it end. Think of it. Every day, a lot of people are being killed. as we talk about, as they play games. So we're not gonna take that, and we'll see. I think
Every day, people in Yemen and Gaza are being killed as
but they don't matter.
and your Israeli
They don't matter
allies
from this
drop
point of view.
bombs on them. But those people don't count because they're not white. And,
I think what's fascinating to me about the clip is when we're going to pass sanctions. They're going to be crushing. We're going to destroy the Russian economy more than Joe Biden. Joe Biden had kid gloves on. And that is more like, we're just going to walk. Even Rubio was like, we have other things to do. We need to make moves. We're leaving. That's
okay. So that's actually we've talked about it. That's the ideal Russian outcome. They know that the U.S. can never agree to Russian terms, no matter how much Donald Trump despises Zelensky, has contempt for him, hates and has contempt for the European political elite, and doesn't really care about Ukraine. As he said, he's got other priorities. He's still the U.S. president, right? He owned this war fully as soon as he became president. And his pretense that he had nothing to do with everything that led up to it. He at other situations, he likes to brag that he was the one who sent the javelins to the Kiev regime, right? And launched all these sanctions against Russia, before 2022, right? So, but, we'll leave that, we'll give him his posing, his narrative, because that's not as important now. It sounds almost too good to be true. Wait a minute. What you're telling us, if we just don't agree to your ceasefire that we were never going to agree to anyway, then you just walk away, right? It can't be that and we can finish what we want, right? And at the same time, it has to be said that everything that has come out, all right, from the words of Trump himself, they made it sound like if the ceasefire, the diplomatic settlement failed, and the U.S. did walk away, that they would not send more new weapons to Ukraine, right? That they may continue the flow of long-term contracts that the Biden administration had signed with the U.S. military-industrial complex, but there would be no new weapons packages, that there would be no new requests for Congress for money for arms, for new weapon packages for Ukraine. It's that can't be just what it is, because it is a position that gives Russia every incentive to do what they were already planning on doing and just saying no, right? That's Russia being troublesome. Yeah, so okay, whatever you want to call us horrible people, we can take that, right? You always picture us wearing the black hat anyway. We got no problem with that. So there has to be, of course, more to it than that, right? And I see, if the Trump administration does walk away, and a big question, on if that happens, then the likely outcome is that Trump will probably stop, or at least, continue very reduced amount of arms flow to Ukraine. But he will also probably have to throw some additional sanctions at Russia, right? He'll have to, in some way, punish them, right? Even if it's, let's just say it's token sanctions. If the U.S. is capable of anything more than additional token sanctions. But I mean, the U.S. now has a very major trade war that seems extremely ill-considered with China, and the potential of a tariff war with most of the world just on pause now. This threat of, again, him threatening war with Iran if they don't agree to his deal, right? That's a peacemaker Trump again. And Russia being absolutely essential to any nuclear agreement with Iran being reached, as with the JCPOA 1.0, because we all know this is just going to be JCPOA 2.0, right? The Trump trademarked version. that both sides will spin is better than the original for them. I don't believe he will have to cover himself in some way and punish Russia, but Russia's okay with that, right? Kirill Dmitriev, when he went to the White House, spoke to Witkoff, right, and appeared on Fox News, he made clear that, your idea that you can sweeten the pot for us by easing sanctions, we don't care, right? That's not a priority right now. If you want to do that, if you want to negotiate your own companies come begging and groveling back for access to the Russian market, right? That's fine. But our economy is growing faster than yours and faster than the Europeans at a 4% clip, right? It's not 10%, right? But we're experiencing what is a normal peacetime acceptable and good economic growth, despite your existential economic war of sanctions and trying to block us out of global financial institutions and stealing $300 billion worth of our reserves, right, held in Western banks, right? Then it's not a priority for us. We've got geopolitical priorities, right? And we're not going to offer you concessions on those. As you pointed out, there's more. It's not about territory even. You say that the Trump administration agrees now that Ukraine will not be part of NATO. But how do you codify that Russia will believe it moving forward, right? Not just under the Trump administration, but under whoever the next administration and the next administration is, right?
And you can't. You have Mark Root out here effectively saying, "We'll revisit this after a peace is signed."
No. There is no. Yeah. It not only has to be guaranteed; it has to be legal. I can't even imagine what would be legally binding, because the Minsk agreements were bound in a UN Security Council resolution that supposedly everyone agreed on. And then it was revealed, that the French and Germans and the Kiev regime just never intended to fulfill it, right? As Merkel said, as Hollande said, it was never meant to be enacted. It was just to buy time for NATO to build up a powerful proxy army in Ukraine. So how do you make Russia trust you again? The response from Russia, from the Russian military, is certainly we can't trust them at all. And the only way we can trust them is with taking everything and putting a boot on their neck, right, and dictating terms. That's
the plan now. Like, meaning the priorities have moved, because initially it seemed to be, okay, we want to stop the war and we're willing to have a deal to stop the war. And so do you have the Istanbul agreements, or like you said, we go back to Minsk. We don't want a war to start, so we're going to do Minsk. We don't want the war to continue, so we're going to do the Istanbul agreements. All right, these territories are now ours, but we're willing to make a deal in order to, for our priorities to be met. But are we just at the point where it's like, we don't trust you? And there's no way to ensure that Ukraine remains out of NATO short of taking all of Ukraine, especially with Europe. Europe is fascinating to me because they've decided to run a parallel track to whatever Donald Trump is doing. So Zelensky goes, he gets pat on the head. Oh, he treated you so badly. Yeah, he treated me so badly. And they have almost decided to have this kind of parallel track of everything that Donald Trump is doing. Now, I don't know if they're bluffing.
It's not parallel, it's perpendicular. It's completely opposite, right?
Yes, it is, right? Like they're trying.
Everything they do is meant to make sure that a police settlement,
exactly.
Right? If you listen to all of them, they're planning to drag this war out as long as possible, right, till 2029 or 2030, and then going to war with Russia directly then when they're better prepared for it. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah, so effectively, there is no way to gain a peace because there's no way to.
The Kremlin is still, right, of the, if you can meet our demands and convince us, right, try to convince us, we're willing to talk, we're willing to listen. We think that bilateral relations with the U.S., hopefully over your administration, can be improved, right? Regardless of what happens with a Ukraine settlement, that's what Russia, they're on a 2-track diplomatic, right? The bilateral improvement of relations, the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine, right? Diplomatically, even under the assumption that this doesn't work out, we hope that the some improvement of bilateral relations for all of the other important things we need to deal with in the world at a basic diplomatic level, moves forward. But if you don't meet these demands, then we can and we will take them on the battlefield. And at some level, you acknowledge that, even though it's mostly implied and it's not said out loud. And if you want to call us horrible people, that's fine. We think the same of you, right? Whatever.
By the way, I think he's talking about Zelensky. I don't know if he's talking about Putin in this. I get the sense that he has, like you said, contempt, a deep, raging contempt.
Here's the problem is nothing that Trump says cannot be reversed, right? It was a situation, just over a month ago, when Trump called Zelensky a dictator, right? And I'm like, whoa. I mean, it's accurate, right? All right, but yeah, I mean, you just can't walk that back, right? It's not something that you can just, the U.S. president called Zelensky a dictator, really acknowledge, right? And what did he do a week later? Did I say that? It doesn't sound like something I'd said. and everyone just, yes, the emperor is wearing beautiful clothes, and no one ever revisited or questioned that. So, I mean, Trump brokered a ceasefire with Hamas and Israel, pumped Israel full of weapons and now 2,000-pound bombs again, and gave a green light for the complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza and effectively the entirety of the rest of Palestine. And Israel resumed the conflict, breaking the ceasefire. And we're supposed to trust this government on a ceasefire in Ukraine? Oh, it's completely different in Ukraine because Trump has respect for Putin, right? Yeah, that's really flattering and everything. Not really, right? But the Kremlin's not going to, just, oh, it's different for us. We got it, right? After the last few years. No. Yeah, I mean, the Kremlin hasn't abandoned all hope. I think Putin perennially always hopes for a diplomat, has a tradition of caution and appeasement of the West and wanting a diplomatic settlement. But it's almost impossible, I think. You want to say a 1% chance? I don't know. 5% being really generous. Yeah. If the Trump administration can just walk away without agreeing to the terms, that would be acceptable to Russia, right? I myself have said previously that would be so potentially politically costly to Trump, right? He would be the one that betrayed the West. He would be the one that handed Ukraine to Vladimir Putin.
They think that now. They think that now.
But it will reach an as of yet unimaginable fever pitch, right?
See, if he was going to do that, he should have did it right off the bat.
He should have, right?
Yeah, I'm dropping it. That's Joe Biden's war. This is not me.
Not that I agree with Steve Bannon on much, if anything, but he did say that right out. He said, "Don't even try to settle this. Just walk away. Don't get trapped in it." Right? Well, he was right, but as people rightly started pointing, well, the still people with a degree of rationality pointed out, well, we got Mike Waltz there, we got Marco Rubio, right? We got Hegseth. That's a whole lot of neocons in this. Supposedly, according to Trump Jr., we must have no neocons. Trump administration 2.0. I mean, what do you expect then, right? I mean, quite obvious. Trump was okay with this internal debate, but being presented to him as to the decider. But it doesn't seem that he's able to make that decision.
Right.
I still, he doesn't have good options, right? His other option at this point is if Russia continues to refuse to accept terms dictated by the U.S. on U.S. interests, as the losing side of this proxy war, not some neutral third party arbiter or something like that. NATO, the US, NATO lost this war against Russia. You came, you lost, right? We warned you. You insisted, you made this, right? It wasn't, Putin, it was the Secretary General of NATO, multiple of them, now, that said that if Ukraine, meaning the Kiev regime, loses this conflict, that would be a defeat for NATO. And that was them that said that. They made this the geopolitical crux issue that now calls into question NATO and the whole U.S.-led Western global hegemonic project. You put it all on the line in Ukraine. You didn't have to do that. But you did, and now you've lost, and of course you're still unwilling to accept that. But you don't get to dictate terms. We dictate the terms. If you don't accept them, then you can either walk away or walk the Biden path of just dragging the inevitable out with as much arms and finance as you can continue to bleed and pour into the Kiev regime until we can grind them to death. But we'll do that eventually too. And then, there won't be any face-saving negotiations. It will be an unconditional surrender, and that this is the facts on the ground, and that's it. Game over. And if Russia doesn't get any long-term peace on its western border as a result of that, well, let's be honest, with the current generation of EU political and foreign policy elite, that was never going to happen anyway. There was no way that this conflict is going to end. They are pitched to such a degree of jingoistic, racist, anti-Russian, not just political, but cultural, social settlement in Europe right now. I mean, they've in the Baltics, in Estonia, they've just removed the right of ethnic Russians to vote because they're ethnic Russians, right? Not because even they've dared to voice support for what Russia, Russia's intervention in Ukraine. No, just for being ethnic Russians, right? That goes even beyond the idea of collective punishment, which was supposedly a core EU value, that collective punishment is not an acceptable thing, right? Much less the approving of the attacks on the religion, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the banning of 21 plus political parties in Ukraine, right? The silencing of all critical media in the country, again and again. What freedoms, right? I can't wear a St. George ribbon, orange and black, reflecting the right of the memory of the Soviet victory in the defeat of Nazi Germany, whose 80th anniversary we settled on May 9th. If I'm in Germany or elsewhere in the EU, I would be imprisoned.
So disturbing. That's so disturbing.
Give me the Nazis. Just stop with all the lectures on democracy and your pretense at moral superiority. We just laugh and ignore at that anymore. It's not even something that is reflexively considered anymore. We're the bad guys. No, you are the bad guys, right? The Europeans, the Americans, you're the bad guys. That's it. We don't even reflexively consider your shrill voices to the opposite.
Europe has gone nuts.
Yeah.
And as I told my ex, you guys are losing your mind. It's unrecognizable in a very bizarre way. I mean, not even just the Russian thing, destroying the Romanian elections, for example, putting Le Pen in jail, the way they've treated Hungary, they have taken this hysterical war footing where it's almost like losing in Ukraine pops something off in their minds that they just.
We have always been at war with Eurasia. I mean, it's George Orwell, right? I mean,
I know, but right Jesus Christ, man, it's like 500 years or more have passed. I know.
And,
It's just
the Russians are still the barbarians on the fringes of Europe and have always been that. That is always
but at a certain point,
anti-hatred of Russians is the new acceptable anti-Semitism. You know, let's be honest about that.
Well,
I mean,
and
when they're
Arabs.
banning Tchaikovsky concerts and Russian books and universities and Russian breed cats or Russian named trees from competitions, for Christ's sake, they are. It is an insane asylum, and ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, what happened is that this is mostly driven by the elite, right? Whether it's the political elite, the media elite, right, the academia elite, it's all the same thing. Right? It's driven by the elite. Doesn't mean that the public doesn't take it on board, right? But it's driven by the elite. And I think ultimately it's that the European elite has come to believe in US-led Western global hegemony more than the current US administration does. And a big part of that is the ideology, the messianic supremacist ideology of exceptionalism, right? Originally American exceptionalism, the Europeans now quite clearly have been mentally colonized, right, to have the same opinion, where they believe that they are societally, structurally, and morally superior to every other people. That's that whole Burrell garden in the jungle racist narrative that they just look shocked when you call it out, right? How could you deny that Europe is the shining civilization, with the US military muscle, right, is the shining civilization of the world. And the fact that a barbarian country, right, a barbarian authoritarian country, right, not real Democrats like us, of course, right, that they derided as a gas station or Nigeria with snow. They can't beat us. We can't accept being beaten by them, because that then challenges their own identity, their own conception of themselves as that exceptional civilization, right? They just can't accept the outcomes, right? It shatters their conception of the world and of their place in that world. They just collectively can't come to grips with that. They're in effect in the same kind of delusional headspace that Zelensky is in, that Biden, such as he had any conscious thought.
Yeah, it's an autoplan. I guess my thing is, so Trump is effectively presented with two sides that want to maintain the war, with one side being delusional enough to maintain the war. I mean, it's a complete delusion if you keep going, right? Especially when it's clear as day, you can't replace your manpower. You're losing and you're being pushed back on multiple fronts. And at this point, you're talking about bringing kids, like 18-year-olds, into the conflict, women into the conflict, because you can't keep your manpower up. And the other side that can replace their losses. And even, I was looking at some of the numbers, it seems like the losses are increasing for the Ukrainian side and decreasing from the Russian side. So it's like one side is like, we can do this all year. We're okay with keeping this going. We're good.
And we don't want to, right?
Yeah,
because
we don't want to, right?
Whatever casualties we're suffering every day, a fraction of yours are still too many, right? And as far as Russians are concerned, this is voiced again. They regard that the Ukrainian nation, right, such as it is, right, the Ukrainian people have been hijacked, that they have a cancer, that something has gone wrong up here, and they need to save them. They don't want to kill Ukrainians, right? They say it again and again. They said it from the beginning. We're not at war with the Ukrainian people. In fact, for a big portion of the Ukrainian people, we're here to save you from the regime, the West-backed regime that has been attacking you for the last decade, right? We're except for the Banderites, right? That's the exception, right? What is called denazification, which goes far more than just getting rid of Zelensky. Zelensky actually didn't start out that way. He internalized all of that when he became the leader of that regime, right? He absorbed it. I don't know. We want to call it Stockholm syndrome. I don't even know what to call it, but he absorbed that, right? It is the regime. The regime needs to be torn down. And I have been honest from the beginning that I saw no way for that to be reasonably accomplished, right? The denazification, I prefer to call it correctly, the debanderization of Ukraine without regime change in Kiev. Regime change complete and total, and I don't see how that could be possible without, whether they come marching in or they come fighting in without Russian troops on the ground in Kiev. I don't see how that could be accomplished otherwise, right?
When that happens, you're going to lose it.
Yeah. How do you stop the Banderites from, maintaining position and political power in the country? How do you lustrate them out of Ukrainian politics the way they lustrated out, right, all Eastern Ukrainian political voices when they seized power in 2014? It's not possible without physical control of the country. They did it largely with Banderite militias because the country was so weak and fragile, starting in 2014. And eventually, we see Azov is now a core, the first core of the new restructured Ukrainian army, which is just putting a new branding on it in the middle of a war, right? But this is the expansion and the entrenchment of Azov. Echoes the entrenchment of the Nazi Party and the Waffen SS in Nazi Germany, in World War II.
If you had to estimate, how long do you think? Let's assume for the moment that Trump is telling the truth, which is a hard thing to assume because it's Trump. And he's like, all right, Zelensky is going to work with the Europeans to kill the deal. The Russians are working with me, but they don't really want a deal. And even maybe I could get one with the Russians, but Zelensky is not going to take the deal. I'm walking. I'm done. Wipe hands. I'm gone. How long does it take, do you think, them to fall? I mean, it seems like the military is getting weaker and weaker day in and day out, which makes what Zelensky is doing even more just astonishing. And a question was asked to Trump about European peacekeepers. He said, hey, what do you think about European peacekeepers in Russia? He was like, I love peacekeepers. Peacekeepers are awesome. No issue. What he didn't say, though, is we're going to back them. Right? No security guarantees. That mineral deal that they're supposed to sign on Thursday has no security guarantees associated with it. And from Trump's point of view, if you want to go into Russia and get shot in the face, God bless you, we're not coming to your rescue. He has said that all the way through. And even in answering that question, he never said anything about America coming in. They are going to have a collective shit fit when Russia takes Ukraine entirely and the military collapses. It is going to be a clear loss. No more, this is a stalemate. No more Ukraine is holding its own. It's, oh my God, the military has fundamentally collapsed and Russia is now taking Ukraine. How long is that? Like, is that a year? Is that 6 months? Is that 2 years?
If you're listening to the Kiev regime now, they are saying that with just European support, they have increased drone production, and that's all they need is drones, right? Never mind, of course, the fact that yes, they're making more drones than they were at the start of this conflict, right? And statements from certain Ukrainian officials that say that their new giant drone production facilities are thousands of kilometers from the contact line, which you do the math, that puts it in Poland or Germany. That's where the drone factories are being, safely out of Russian reach for the moment, right? They believe that they can fight Russia just with drones, right? I would say, first of all, drones are obviously an increasingly important, part and the nature of this conflict, the way the war and the technology has evolved since 2022. But you can't accomplish everything with drones. And then there is the fact that Russian industrial scale drone production is still several times larger, right? And this has previously been admitted to even by the head of the Kiev regime's, autonomous vehicles, their drone head in the military. That Russia is outproducing them 4 to 5 times. So I don't see how that's possible. But I would not be surprised if the Kiev regime can, if they, do conscript 18 to 25-year-olds, and then potentially women as well. They can drag it out for another year, 2 years, right? It's possible, right? A lot of it depends on how much Russia is willing to risk to go big, right? To try to end it, right? What is the calculus by the Stavka, by the Russian military, right? Is our casualties more if we continue to attrit them away with the same strategy that has been effective for us now, a war of attrition, or would in the long run, if it's clear that we have to take Kiev and perhaps further, right, to go for broke and launch, some maneuver warfare that would go after Kiev, right, which would, need somewhere between 300 and 500,000 troops that Russia does have, right, just in the SMO forces. But I think that if it becomes necessary to occupy all of Ukraine, then Russia will have to mobilize people. The voluntary contract soldiers will not be enough. They'll have to call up more reserves.
Would they be accepted? Because I would imagine that's the fear, right? You don't want to some political instability when you're calling.
That's the fear. It would be accepted. There would be more than the almost non-existent, disagreement within Russia. Now, of course, there would be more, right? But as long as it was restricted to reservists, and Russia does have some 1.7 million reservists, it could still call up, right? Before doing what the Kiev regime has done, forcible conscription of the civilian population, for that would never, become necessary in any foreseeable forecast, unless we're talking total war with the US and NATO. That's the only point where that would become necessary. But they could still drag out the war. A lot of people think that, if the Trump walks away, that the conflict will be over next month or in 2 months or something.
I heard 6 months. Yeah. You're skeptical of that.
Too much is contingent. Yeah, I'm skeptical of that, right? Russia has advancing, but the advancement is still an advancement of local collapses of the Kiev regime military, not total collapses, right? They're increasingly, as we've just pointed out, doing production in Europe, right? Ukrainians working at factories, as whatever you want to consider them within European countries. And can the Europeans replace the US? No. Can they drag this out potentially longer? Right? Yeah, probably. Ultimately, I would be more worried about the manpower question causing a collapse of the Ukrainian military at some point in the next year than I would be about a complete lack of arms, right? And again, remember that the U.S. military-industrial complex still has long-term contracts that Biden served on artillery shells, on this, on that. And there has been nothing from the Trump administration that they would block those contracts, even if they walked away, that those would continue. So to say that the U.S. would be completely removed from the conflict, even if they sent no new weapons packages, is wrong.
Not so much. Mark.
Yeah. So they can drag it out. They can drag it out and make it hard and bloody. But that's nothing that Russia hasn't considered and dealt with for the last 3 years.
Mark Sleboda, you are fantastic, man. Great, just fantastic rundown. I know a lot of people on this channel may know how all of this stuff started. The history lesson, I think sometimes is necessary. And I do it in my videos too. It's like, dude, you guys are getting a snapshot. Like, meaning when the media talks about it, NPR, they may say, Russia invaded and Putin wants Europe. And that's all. Like, that is the entire snapshot of the way they talk about it. And so that is repeated over and over. And so people in their minds, like you said, in Europe, or in the US, come to the south. Well, he just invaded, right? He just wants all of Europe. And it's like, no, that is nonsense. Like that doesn't. They make a villain as opposed to somebody who's a rational actor and doing something for their own security interests. It's very weird in America and the way they talk about it. Even though with Trump in, the opinion is split in a weird way. And they're nuts. They're nuts on this issue. I'm sorry, they are. Mark Sleboda.
Hungary and Slovakia excluded.
Yes. yes. Yeah, those are the only two that have been more sane on this. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find him on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. You can also find him on his channel, Real Politics with Mark Sleboda. That's on YouTube at facebook.com/Gramsci. Mark, are you anywhere else? Just
Facebook is already, for grandparents and stuff mostly. Not that there's not some grandparents out there listening, but you can follow me on Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1, or at on Substack or Telegram at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
You're fantastic, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
You as well.
All right. I would like to bring in my next guest, Robert Fatina. And just to give your bio, the audience, I'm not sure if I've had you on this channel. I know you've been on the radio. Robert Fatina, he is an author, journalist, and activist working for peace, social justice. He's an author of the book Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. Robert, I think I'm mispronouncing your last name. Could you please pronounce it for me once, and I'll get it?
Fantina.
Thank you, Fantina. Okay. It kept coming out wrong. I kept saying, okay, this doesn't sound right. Fantina.
Right.
I will warn you that they're doing construction upstairs. I did not know they were going to be doing construction upstairs. And there are moments where things get ridiculous. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I can live with that. No problem.
But thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I have watched a genocide take place for the last 2 years, give or take. All of us have on social media, something that in previous instances, it just wasn't available. Mm-hmm. So people couldn't see it. Like there was no, you just get a report on something that happened. It was like, oh, that sounds bad.
Yes.
It's different when you see it. It's a very different animal. And you can even see the opinions of the United States change on this issue, even though it doesn't seem to be making a connection with reality, if that makes sense. It's like what people think doesn't, and what they're doing doesn't seem to influence them continuing to do it. That is very strange to me. And yet that's just kind of where we are on this issue. Trump has extended this to Yemen, and he is doing this as opposed to just making a deal. He is extending it to Yemen, where he's doing the bombings and everything else. The Houthis and Ansar Allah continues their strikes in the Red Sea, despite the bombings that Trump is effectively doing. And they've been shooting down Reaper drones. I'm just giving context for the audience. Mm-hmm. The ICJ has extended Israel's case for 6 months for the suspected genocide, saying we will give you 6 more months to effectively answer the claim that you're committing a genocide, but we find probable cause that you are. All of this stuff is effectively taking place as Israel continues to bomb tents. I was showing the audience video of these kids fleeing a tent after the tent has effectively been bombed, with them killing and burning people alive. Give me your take on, I don't want to say the evolution of this. I don't even know if I can ask for a solution to it, because I don't know if there is one per se, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you see an out for this? Like, do you see anything that gives you some sense of, okay, maybe there's a way for this to end? For example, Hamas has just offered a deal. We'll release all the hostages for us to end the war. Israel is not going to accept it because they don't want to end the killing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. The agreement that was signed back in January was a 3-phase agreement. Both sides mainly adhered to it. Israel didn't entirely, although the Palestinian side did. And then the second 2 phases were to be detailed during that first phase. Well, after the end of the first phase, Israel decided they wanted to move the goalposts, as we say. They wanted to change some of the terms in the second phase. Well, any country that makes an agreement can say they want to, but they've signed onto the agreement. And if the other party in the agreement doesn't want to make the change, then they have to adhere to the agreement. Israel, of course, doesn't need to play by the rules that any other country has to play by. So it simply violated the agreement and continued its savage, unspeakably brutal bombing of the Gaza Strip, and of course accelerated its aggression in the West Bank as well. So what Hamas and Palestine is proposing is very reasonable. The release of the hostages and the complete removal of all Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, and money to rebuild the extensive damage that has been done to housing, all the infrastructure throughout the Gaza Strip. That's very reasonable, because this was a completely disproportionate response to an act of resistance that occurred in October of 2023. So as far as what I see as a resolution, this could have been resolved. The issue between Israel and Palestine could have been resolved decades ago if Israel were made to adhere to international law. That can happen by countries sanctioning Israel, cutting relations, not doing trade, certainly not sending weaponry, academic boycotts, and so on. Now, those are going on. They've been ongoing with the BDS movement for several years, but governments haven't taken this role. Am I optimistic about it happening? No, I am not. Unfortunately, I think this genocide will continue until Israel gets everything it wants, which is complete possession of Palestine. The Palestinians who remain living on their own lands will be second-class citizens, will not have the same rights as Israelis. Those that are driven out will live in refugee camps for decades, as they have been. There are people who were driven out in 1948 who were very young at that time, who are old now, living in refugee camps. Their children and grandchildren, another generation, are living in refugee camps. This is a situation that was created by the United Nations when it was newly minted in the late 40s, and the United Nations has been absolutely powerless to resolve it. And the United Nations will still not take the steps necessary to resolve this issue. And as a result, millions of Palestinians will continue to suffer.
For the United Nations itself, do they have the UN Security Council? The US is going to veto anything that comes up in regards to dealing with the Israeli issue. Does the United Nations itself have the capability, meaning the UN General Assembly, to do anything in this case? The overwhelming majority of them, with the exception of like the US, Israel, maybe Cuba, not Cuba, like some kind of random Allen out there votes with the US on this. If you have that much support, I'm talking about like 90-something% of saying we want Palestine to be a state, A, and B, what Israel is doing is outrageous. B, what is the remedy for the UN General Assembly? I mean, it can't be that disempowered over the UN Security Council, or is it?
It is very difficult for the General Assembly to take any action on itself. There are certain provisions, and I believe these provisions are being met now, but the General Assembly must actually take the steps to take those actions that are rarely allowable. But it's interesting that when we look at the United Nations, that the 15-member Security Council can act, the 190-some member General Assembly cannot. Where is there any democratic factor in this when a small minority, and that goes down to one, because the United States vetoes any action that is critical of Israel. So the United States is decreeing what over 200 other countries will do on the international stage during a genocide. There is no fairness in this. There's certainly no democracy, and there is certainly no justice in this.
It's about power. It's not about democracy, the UN General Assembly. I mean, most countries don't like to give up power. And so when those countries won that war, they cobbled it together. And to your point, the other countries could pass sanctions. They don't. They could take action unilaterally. They don't. Like South Africa is being punished right now for taking Israel to the ICC court, where the US is effectively going after them over doing so. So I totally get it. It's just there seems to be a reluctance to act. Now this is expanded to Yemen, because the country that decided to act, despite all of the other Arab neighbors just standing by and waving their hands, Yemen did. And they've been firing missiles saying, from here on out, no ship is going through the Red Sea, full stop. they've been knocking down, I think, 26 Reaper drones, which gets across a level of technical sophistication that you don't expect in people who are described as wearing sandals and a band of rebels, because that's the way they're described in the West. Oh, they're rebel or sandal wearing rebel. Okay, well, they're knocking down drones and they're firing missiles that are going at hypersonic speeds in Israel and in the Red Sea as a protest and as a pushback against it. Trump seems to be deciding to try to reignite a war, I'm calling it, quote, civil war, in order to either destabilize or at the very least remove the power structure that is in Yemen. Because despite their proclamations of, we have done great things in stopping the Houthis, they have not. Explain that to us, just so we have some context of what is taking place in Yemen right now.
There are a number of things. First, I want to comment on something you said earlier about how countries are hesitant to sanction Israel. Ireland was going to sanction Israel until the U.S. threatened it. So that's just one example. Again, the United States using its power in very unjust and very unfair ways to maintain that power. But as far as what's happening in Yemen, in the United States is a bombing of Yemen, which was, as you mentioned, ineffective, and the Yemeni army has gotten much more powerful over the last several years, as it initially fought the war mainly against Saudi Arabia, and then there's been a truce for a number of years. But it has grown in its strength and its technological abilities, as you mentioned, by the shooting down drones and so on. And the Yemeni army has been able to block seagoing vessels in the Red Sea and made that something that blocked that trade there. So the United States now is seeing a threat to its power in the Middle East. It wants itself and Israel to be the only powerhouses in that part of the country. And as Yemen is increasing its power, because by blocking the Red Sea, this is major. This is a big deal for the many economies of the world. So the United States sees its power threatened and will do what's necessary to maintain that power. And if that means supporting rebels in Yemen who are opposing the Houthi government and who support the previous very repressive government, then they will do so. The United States will support that. The bombing has not been effective. It has been more performative than effective. People can, the Trump and his courts can say, "Oh, we're taking action. We're bombing Yemen." They're killing innocent people, but they aren't preventing the interruption of the trade in the Red Sea, and that's all they're interested in. They're not interested in human life. They're interested in power and profits. So their desire or their intent to go back and support a civil war in Yemen and to foster that and foment it and see countless numbers of people suffer and die is part of their plan to maintain their power. And this, Jamal, is consistent with the U.S. government from the past. Look what they did in Iran, in Afghanistan, a generation ago in Vietnam, a generation before that in North Korea. It goes on. And I've only touched on some of the more well-known cases where the United States has supported revolutions against democratically elected governments or has overthrown democratically elected governments and killed millions of people. It's estimated that the United States, since the end of World War II, is responsible for over 20 million deaths in the world. That's no other country has that disgraceful a record.
You know what's wild about it, though? You can do that if you have enough propaganda to say you're freedom and justice and love and light, and you can get your population to believe it. The problem is the mask is off. And so it's being done nakedly in a way that is difficult to count by its own citizenry. When I tell my mom that, she's shocked. Like, I don't use the 20 million, I just tell her, when you are doing international politics and you're evaluating it, life doesn't matter. Like, you're evaluating what people are doing and the reasons that they're doing it. But when they're looking at that stuff and making decisions on what they do for political power, life is not included in that, which for a regular person is kind of hard to accept. Like, it's like, what do you mean life doesn't matter? It's like, dude, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Do you believe life mattered in all of these cases where these people were being killed? It didn't. It's astonishing to me.
And that's if I just come, and that's, as you said, life doesn't matter, and the mask is off because people don't have to rely on what MSNBC and Fox News are telling them. They're seeing in real time. They're seeing these burning children, these tents going up in flames, and hearing the people scream, and they know something is radically wrong here. So, as you said, the mask is off. Now, you mentioned propaganda. As you know, I wrote a book on U.S. propaganda a few years ago, and it's not. It's easy to fool the people when you're their only source of information, but now the people who are actually suffering are providing us with information, and we know what's happening.
But it doesn't seem to be connecting. And maybe it takes time to, like, between the inception of information coming through, what people can see, and their opinions changing. It's like, oh my God, this is horrible. Into some kind of political connection to it. I don't know. It's just, you get like half, if not more, of this country saying this is a genocide. Like, flat out. You get a Democratic Party who can't even mention the word. I just showed the video of Sanders getting booed because I'm dodgy about that word. And it's like the ICJ, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all of these organizations are, this is a genocide. This is horrendous. ICJ saying it's plausible, but they're looking into it. I don't know. It's difficult accounts being a part of a country that is paying 70 to 80% for the mass killing of women and children. And your tax dollars are going into it. You are a party to it just because you're part of the country that is doing it. And neither political party, both for the most part, will have the same policy. Democrats may not deport people, but okay, thanks for that. But everything else, like Tim Walz was asked on MSNBC, and he couldn't even articulate how he would be different. He just said, well, people can obviously see we'd be different. Nobody may believe that, but we are. Without articulating how.
Right. Yeah.
How's your policy different?
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, power and profits. Most of the members of Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, rely on campaign donations from pro-Israeli lobbies to fund their campaigns. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars over the years that have been invested. Yeah. The largest person as of a couple of years ago, the person who received the most donations was Joe Biden. So as president, he said, after Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and all these others said this was genocide, he said, we don't see it as genocide. But he wouldn't say what information the government has, the U.S. government has, that Amnesty doesn't have or that Human Rights Watch doesn't have, because he knew who he was beholden to, not the voters of the United States. He's beholden to the lobbies that had supported him all those years and that support his fellow Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. government. So until that stranglehold that Israeli lobbies have on U.S. politicians, we're not going to see significant change.
Can we step into Israel for a moment? You would think that there would be a massive amount of political instability with this level of the war. And what's wild about it, there is. So some of the reporting that was coming out of Israel had, in fact, there were multiple reports. There were some reports talking about how the troops were effectively breaking down because they kept going into Gaza over and over and over. And they kept meeting resistance, and they didn't necessarily know when somebody would get killed. Like, even to the point of using human shields themselves, like putting them on vehicles and riding in front with the idea that if we get attacked, we're going to kill the Palestinians first. Now, one of the interesting things that came out had to do with, where is it? Where they were talking about the number of Israeli troops that just couldn't function. Either they were call-outs. You had the religious issue where many ultra-Orthodox Jews decided, we're not doing it. Netanyahu effectively backed him in that for his own political reasons. Israel sends undertrained soldiers into Gaza amid significant manpower shortage. They were even talking about like 40% calling out. So they don't want to do military service, or they're pulling out of military service. How long can they keep this up functionally, even as a state? I remember Dan Kincaid. Is that right? Daniel Kincaid. Kincaid. I think I might be getting his name wrong. But he was talking about how internally there are contradictions, pressures within the Israeli government. A, they've been fighting a war for X number of years. B, they've been expanding into the countries that they've been going. I mean, you need troops in order to expand into these countries while suffering a manpower shortage simultaneously. And then you get to stuff like internal politics, like the budget, for example. Okay, how do you support your country when many of the people are off to war? And one last part, criminality with Netanyahu. So Yair Lapid came out and effectively said, there will be Jews killing Jews if we don't do something about this. Now, what he's referring to is the head of Shin Bet being fired by Netanyahu and the courts coming in, blocking Netanyahu from doing that because they were investigating criminality dealing with the Qatargate stuff. I'm not going fully into the Qatargate, but the internal pressures to Israel itself. How is the state maintaining its integrity with all of this going on simultaneously? And maybe this is the wrong question to ask, but this is the way I'm going with it to step into it.
No, I think it's a very good question because we aren't hearing a lot about the things that you've mentioned in the so-called mainstream media, but whatever you want to call it. But the Israeli economy is suffering because of what's happening. There is wide dissent. People are demanding a deal with Palestine so that the hostages can be returned. And they're saying that in major demonstrations in Tel Aviv, people are saying that Netanyahu is only prolonging the war for his own political survival, because as you said, he's under indictment for several serious charges. So there's that corruption there. Then the fact that many soldiers are not returning, and many soldiers are speaking out about what they did in Gaza, and they're saying this was wrong. They're saying what I did was wrong as a soldier, and they're saying I'm not the only one who feels this way. That this is fairly widespread. So the morale of the military is very low. There's dissent in the country. There's disagreement about how to proceed with this war. Now, I do want to say that there are many, and probably the majority of Israelis cheer every time a Palestinian dies. But there are pro-Palestinian Israelis. There are several organizations. They're not very well known, but they do exist, and they do good within the occupied Palestine territories. But the chaos in the government now and the instability of it can't be sustained. Now, Netanyahu and his cabinet, I'm sure, believe that whatever difficulties they have, the United States will bail them out. If it's financial, the United States will send them more money in addition to the $4 billion it sends them every year. If they don't have sufficient soldiers, and this is a big question, will the United States send U.S. troops into Gaza? Now, I think the U.S. people would object to that strongly. I think many other countries in the world would object to that, but I don't think the Trump administration would consider that off the table. It wants Israel to get whatever it wants. Trump has talked about the prime real estate that the Gaza Strip could create, which is just, it's beyond callous. People are suffering. Men, women, children, babies are being slaughtered, and he's talking about building resorts on their blood and on their bones. So how Israel will sustain this, and remember, Israel is still is still occasionally bombing Lebanon. It's threatening Iran. It's threatening Yemen. It's bombing Syria. This is a rogue country, totally out of control, and it's ignoring its internal workings, and that's not sustainable.
They seem to think it is. Like, that's the rub, right? I mean, from their point of view, we're taking Gaza. From their point of view, we're taking the West Bank. From their point of view, we're going to take parts of Syria. Nothing stopped us. Assad is gone. Mm-hmm. They're making deals with Turkey to effectively carve up Syria. Meaning all of this stuff takes manpower. And if you're only a country of 8 million people, and you're expanding outward in a way where, okay, who's going to do the labor? Who's going to man the stores? Who's going to ensure that, like, these are all basic things of state that need to take place that require manpower in a country with very little people in context to, other countries. It just seems, like you said, unsustainable. And yet, Netanyahu's like, keep going. So like that, in fact, that article that I showed you was pointing out that they were using undertrained soldiers because so many had been called out. Like you had, I think that thing said like 100,000 or something. Basically, 40% said we don't want to do this. We're out. We don't want to do this anymore. This is not good. We don't like it. We don't like the military service. We want out. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, they had that fight because they were trying to get them into the military. Netanyahu didn't want them in the military, so they're out. So you're having these blocks of people as they occupy all of this land and push and further territories, trying to create this greater Israel. Like I said, it just seems unsustainable, and yet they sustain it and they keep going. What is the goal? I kept asking that. What is the goal? Like, unless you're going to exterminate 1 million, 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, then what are you doing? That's the part that I don't quite get. I don't see the end game. Is the end game a single state called Israel where all of the West Bank and Gaza is included? But if that's the case, then you're going to have an apartheid state because you got to deal with the fact that you're a minority in your own country. Like, what am I missing here? What's the objective ultimately?
Well, the objective, as you mentioned, is an entire Israel state incorporating all of Palestine. And you said, are they willing to kill 1 or 2 million Palestinians? Yes, they are. They have shown no restraint in killing over 50,000 already in the last 18 months. They're willing to, there's talk about refugee camps in Egypt and in other nearby countries and pushing the Palestinians there, forbidding them from ever coming back. So that's just eliminating that problem. So either kill them or expel them from the country and then have this greater Israel. But as you said, if they don't kill all the Palestinians of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which the Israeli government would be perfectly happy doing that, it seems to me, then they're going to have to be dealing with millions of people who are not Israelis. They don't want Israeli citizenship. They want their own country. They know what the international law says, that as far as the borders of what their own country should be, although we can talk about how unfair the initial partition plan was. That's probably a conversation for a different day. But what Netanyahu wants to do, and what his cabinet, is very racist right-wing cabinet wants to do, is create a greater Israel encompassing all that land. And as you said, it'll be an apartheid state, as it is now, where there's a separate set of rules for Israelis and Jews, and where they fall under civil law, and but the Palestinians and the Arabs within those borders fall under military law. So if an Israeli commits a crime and a Palestinian commits the exact same crime, they go to different laws. They have a different set of rules that apply to them. If this isn't apartheid, I don't know what is. So the whole plan, whatever the plan is, to take over all of the occupied Palestinian territories, again, it's not going to work. It's not going to bring peace to the Middle East. It's certainly not going to bring security to the people of Israel. It's just going to continue the problems that have been ongoing for over 70 years and that have been so greatly accelerated in the last 18 months.
Can I ask you something else that's slightly askew to the topic, but kind of associated with it? The Iran negotiations. Those, we're in the second negotiation that took place in Rome. Another negotiation is going to take place. This one is going to be back in Oman. And apparently the negotiations went well. Divided through over a table. They talked for 4 hours. This was supposed to be on red lines and issues of red lines. And the reporting has, at least coming out of Bloomberg, that Donald Trump was, quote unquote, realistic, whatever that means, in his wants or his terms. Because I guess he doesn't want a war, because a war is going to be catastrophic and unpredictable. I had a conversation with someone else on this topic that I don't know if we fully agreed or disagreed. He sends Witkoff to this also, as he sent Witkoff to pretty much everywhere in these negotiations, like he doesn't trust his own State Department. So he sent Witkoff, he's like, I want a realist. I don't want a neocon. If I have a neocon, we're going to war. So Witkoff goes, and initially when Witkoff comes back, he says, we're talking about refinement less than at 3% or something to that effect. Then, after getting criticism for being, I guess, Iran's man or flaking out, he comes back on Twitter is like, we're going to get a Trumpian deal, and it's going to be more aggressive. Basically, he contradicted his first statement on it.
Mhm.
The foreign minister for Iran has come out and effectively echoed what Witkoff said the first time, that this is about nuclear sites, nothing else. We're not talking about our missiles. We're not talking about support for the region. It's purely about nuclear enrichment. That is all we're willing to discuss. And the U.S. has respected that. Meaning, yeah, the deal can fall apart, but it hasn't fallen apart yet. And the things that they're talking about haven't been so far apart that they don't think they can get closer together. Now, Trump has put a deadline on this, oddly enough. He wants to get everything done immediately for some reason. And in the context of the deadline is like, look, we're not going to negotiate forever. However, we believe, I'm paraphrasing, we believe we can get a deal. I would prefer to get a deal as opposed to having some kind of conflict. Israel has come out and has effectively said, and this, I got to be honest, the story doesn't entirely make sense to me, but whatever, I'll run with it. It says they don't care what Trump thinks. They don't care that negotiations are taking place. They may hit Iran anyway. Now, the reason why I said the story doesn't entirely make sense is because it will require U.S. help to do so. So while the U.S. is negotiating, trying to stop and prevent a war, Israel doesn't agree with this negotiation, by the way, apparently, and not just not agree with it, believes they should just go to war. Now, what they're talking about is not them going to war. They're talking about the U.S. effectively going to war because the U.S. will have to save their ass in any kind of conflict and would have to carry the bulk of the load in any kind of conflict. So Trump is like, okay, that sounds bad. The results are unpredictable. I don't know if I want to invest into this, what may be a large protracted war in the Middle East. Tulsi Gabbard, Hegseth, all of these other people in his administration, many of which are neocons, even agreed with him saying, we don't know what you're playing, man. This doesn't look good. And so there seems to be, and I'm saying seems because I don't know if that's true, and I'm going to explain why, a dichotomy in Israel versus Trump. And rationally, it should be, because the U.S. is one would have to take the consequences of whatever happens in the world if indeed they attack. So Israel's like, hey, we may hit them anyway. We don't agree with these negotiations. We've told Trump we don't agree with these negotiations. But then the article says it would only need limited U.S. help. And I was like, wait a minute. How are you alienating the U.S. by a single attack, but you need the U.S. for help? Now, this could be part of a pressure campaign where all of these guys are working together and saying this stuff. I have no idea which one it is. Give me if you had to give an opinion on the potential for getting a deal, almost like a JCPOA 2.0, what would it be? I mean, Iran said they want more than they got out of the first JCPOA. They weren't satisfied with it. Trump is the one that pulled out of it. So from their point of view, we want more out of this particular deal and stronger ironclad guarantees that you just won't pull out. Now, Trump has said, if we don't get a deal, we are going to attack you with some kind of battle plan that is effectively going to be catastrophic for the world. Give me your take, your assessment of these negotiations and everything that has been going on around them.
Well, it's very interesting that Trump did open negotiations because, as you said, he was the one who violated the JCPOA when the Iranian government was adhering to it strictly. So the Iranian government now has to be very suspicious. And the fact that they want more guarantees and a better deal is certainly legitimate because of what happened the last time. Now, Israel, again, saying that they, regardless of the U.S.-Iran negotiations and any agreement that those two countries make, is still going to bomb nuclear sites if they feel it's, quote, necessary, is an indication, again, of how out of control the Israeli government is and how the United States refuses to put it under any control. The United States would support it with weaponry if Israel decided to want to bomb Iran. Despite the agreement, then the United States would provide the weapons for that. During the Biden administration, Biden spokespeople said that the U.S. was doing everything it could to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza. It's not doing everything. It could stop sending the weapons. It could stop protecting Israel on the diplomatic stage. So it's the same kind of thing here, that Trump will say he's doing everything possible to bring about a deal with Iran, except giving Iran what it wants, and Iran's demands are reasonable. So I think it's a good sign that these negotiations are happening. I think it's a good sign that at the moment Trump seems reasonable, and I don't think I've ever said those three words together. Trump seems reasonable in the past, but if this does result in a deal that will bring a cooling off to that part of the world, that's great. Now, another key thing I think is that the United States government for years has said that it will not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. And I don't know who the United States is to dictate anything to another country, but also the United States is the only country that has ever used nuclear weapons and has the largest stockpile of them in the world. So how arrogant to say we won't allow this country or that country to have them. The Iranian government does not want nuclear weapons based on their religious beliefs. However, if the government leaders said we need to deter Israel and the United States, and the only way we can do that is if we have our own nuclear weapons. Now, I'm a person who believes fewer nuclear weapons in the world is better, but I would understand completely if the Iranian government said, yeah, we're going to develop nuclear weapons. Although they have never said that, there's been no indication that they're enriching uranium to that degree. They are enriching it above possibly what they need for peaceful causes, but they have to have some kind of some leverage in a negotiation, and this is their leverage.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you. There are so many guests. I have had arguments with guests on this, where I would start off with the context like, this is an outrageous conversation because the conversation doesn't really make sense. Israel has nukes, for one. Israel has been on a genocidal rampage, killing 50 to 100,000 people, 2/3 of which are women and children. They've been invading country after country after country, not to mention running an open-air ghetto and an apartheid state. They're out of control. Iran hasn't invaded anybody. And this idea that Iran is the problem in this is outrageous, right? It's like the very fact that we're talking about Iran in this is just strange. It's weird to me. And when people start off the conversation, they start off on Iran. And my thing is kind of like, hey, can we just acknowledge the first context is true? Like we're talking about Iran purely because a state is talking about unilaterally attacking another state for no reason, using a similar premise as they did with Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Okay, well, Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction, right? And yet they use it as a pretext by which to attack and destroy their country. History is rhyming. We think they're getting a nuclear bomb and we don't want them to get a nuclear bomb. Okay, dude, we don't have a nuclear bomb. Our own assessments say they don't have a nuclear bomb. Yeah, but they might get one. So we need to now attack them in a rerun of Iraq. It's outrageous that this is a conversation we almost on some level have to have because we don't want to see another country get attacked unilaterally by another country bullying them at the behest of Israel. It's astonishing, right?
Absolutely astonishing.
So thank you for mentioning that as you were explaining it, because many people, when they have the conversation, they do not. They don't. They just don't. They ignore the fact that Israel has nukes. They ignore the fact that Israel's doing all this stuff, and they start at Iran. Well, we can't let them get a nuke. And it's like, who are you to tell them that they can't? There's that too, right? Like they're an independent actor. All these other countries have nukes. And we're saying, yeah, we don't like you to get a nuke because we don't want you to threaten Israel. Okay, but they're not attacking us. They're not threatening us. This is not an issue for the United States. And yet we've taken this role of we will destroy your country unilaterally.
And if I could point out, the last time Iran attacked another country was 1790 something. Now, Israel has attacked several countries in the last year. The United States has attacked countless countries in the last 20 years. So why is there this great fear of an attack from Iran?
I think Wesley Clark is right. I think regardless of the president, and this is why I don't believe Trump is bluffing. I think he would hit Iran. Regardless of the president, there's been, and I want to get your take on this, a coherent strategy, a thread that has gone through all of the presidencies of eliminating one Arab state after the next, especially if they had any level of resistance. So Libya, Sudan is in just utter chaos right now. Iraq, Afghanistan, I may be missing one or two. But effectively going through each of those countries with Iran being the last man standing and defying the odds on some level. And now it's like, okay, you have all of these lunatics that are in the Trump administration, all of them devout Zionists. Some of them believe Christ is going to return because of Israel. And you have Trump, who has isolated some of them and sent Witkoff to try to get a deal. Almost like the realist is being sent with the State Department being too crazy for him to effectively use. Regardless of the president, those governments have fallen. They've been attacked. They've been destabilized. They've used terrorists to undermine them. Syria, a really good example, where I've been working on that government for years. Obama spent billions year after year to destabilize Syria, only for it to effectively crumble under the Biden administration as he was on his way out. So I don't trust anything that is coming out of the U.S. in regards to Iran. Any kind of deal, from my point of view, is going to be used to weaken Iran. Now, it depends on what's in Trump's mind. It may not be this administration, it could be the next one. But it seems like there's a coherent strategy to destroy that country. And I suspect that Netanyahu believing, look at all the neocons in Trump's administration, all of them are devout Zionists. This is the time where we can effectively get what we need to get, and we can get it now. That includes Gaza, that includes the West Bank. He would let us kill every last one of them, and he would defend it. And right now, we can go after Iran. Trump will back us in doing so. That's the way I see it, right? I could be wrong on this. I have a darker view on this than some of the other people who've come on the channel and talked about it. Give me your view of it. Am I too negative in the way that I'm looking at this? Because the truth of the matter is, whatever they end up negotiating, that's not enough. Then what? They've already said, if you don't accept what we offer, we're bombing you. So he set himself in a box where we get what we want or else. Now, you can either back away from that. If you back away from that, you lose so much credibility because you've spent the last month saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Okay, I was just bluffing. Well, I don't buy that the rhetoric allows you to bluff. I think the rhetoric forces you, compels your behavior. Give me your take on this. And this can be the last question, by the way. I'm just curious on how somebody else sees it, especially somebody who wrote the book on some of the subject matter.
Well, I could be very brief and say I agree with you, but I'll give you a little more detail than that. One, as far as Trump backing down and losing face, he doesn't care about those sorts of things. I mean, he certainly cares about his image, but he will spin it in some way. Oh, this is exactly what I wanted, and all my negotiation led to this exact thing, and this is behind the scenes. So I'm great. But when you talk about how different U.S. administrations have decimated the Middle East, Libya, you mentioned Libya. Libya used to be referred to as the Switzerland of the Middle East. It was a place that there were resorts, people visited there, and now it is a failed state thanks to Barack Obama. Look what over 20 years of U.S. military intervention in Afghanistan did to that country. It just decimated it. Iraq, after the shock and awe campaign under George Bush, the sectarian violence and the sectarian divisions that that didn't exist to any great degree prior to the U.S. invasion are now there all the time, and it's the people there are not better off. People in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria are not better off than they were prior to U.S. intervention. So we're seeing it in Iran again. The difference with Iran is, remember a couple of years ago or years ago that Iran and Saudi Arabia became aligned again. They had severed relations, but now they're back. China brokered that. So Iran is not a country without major allies. Now, I'm not saying that Saudi Arabia would join the United States if it invaded Iran, but how is China going to react to an Iranian invasion? How is Russia going to act to an invasion of Iran by the United States or Israel? These are unknowns. And with so many countries in the Middle East having nuclear weapons, and of course China and Russia do too, any invasion of Iran is going to set a fuse on a bomb that will explode the world. And some countries know that. I don't know if Trump realized that, or the neocons in his administration. During his first administration, there was talk about the adults in the room. There don't seem to be many left in the room this time around. But the United States has, over a period of decades, sought to destabilize countries, and done it successfully, destabilize countries in the Middle East, causing untold suffering as a result, which the US government doesn't care about. And they're continuing that. Their sights are set in Iran, but I think they will have far less luck with Iran than they had with many other countries there. Don't hear you.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's construction upstairs, so I put the mute button on.
Okay.
It's banging and everything else is just insane. Thank you for this. I deeply appreciate this conversation. It's been such a long time since I think I've had the opportunity to talk to you about it. And I think this is the first time my audience has the opportunity to see you and to hear you. Thank you for this. We have a really good crowd that had the opportunity to hear you. And personally, these conversations I enjoy. I enjoy it because I want other people's perspective on how they view this stuff.
Mhm.
Like, some people have a much darker lens. Some people have a much optimistic lens in the way they look at it. And so hearing those takes helps me gauge my own sense of reality and like what's more true, what's less true, that type of thing. I really appreciate this.
Thank
Robert
you.
Fatina. He is author, journalist, activist, working for peace and social justice, author of the book Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. By the way, do you have any other additional books? And where are you that people can find you?
They can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, or X now. And yes, I mentioned my book on propaganda. It's called Propaganda, Lies, and False Flags, How the U.S. Justifies Its Wars. I have another book on foreign policy called Empire, Racism, and Genocide, A History of U.S. Foreign Policy. And then a couple of books on, another one on Palestine, Occupied Palestine, Israel, the U.S., and International Law. So those are available on Amazon or wherever people buy books.
Oh, wow. I am talking to the right person. Thank you for this. You have a good one, okay? Be safe.
Thank you. You too. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. All right. Definitely appreciate Robert. Like I said, had the opportunity to talk to him for a while. And by the way, when the other interview, Joe, what is his name? It'll come to me in a moment. Those were people who I had the opportunity to talk to, God, I want to say years ago, and had never brought him on the show. I appreciate the audience response to him. That was great. His video did very well. And I hope you like Robert also. He's very knowledgeable about the subject matter. I would tell you, this subject matter is hard to cover. And I'm saying this right. I need to say this right. It's so morbid. It's so morbid. And because it's so morbid, it is difficult to do a show where over and over again, you're talking about the number of people who were killed by a fascist regime. Nobody watches that show because that show is very morbid. And so you have to talk about it in a particular way and have it tucked in a larger context of what is taking place in a geopolitical sense. Other channels, fine. This channel does more about geopolitics, right? And domestic. And so it's almost like, okay, what is this in the context of the larger framework? What are they trying to accomplish? What is going on in the region? How is the region dealing with this issue? Like, it's to be talked about in a particular way. Robert is the perfect person to deal with both. You heard the number of books that he wrote on it. Even on the book on propaganda, as pointed out, you cannot do this without having this kind of freedom and justice, mantle as you do this stuff behind the scenes. I'll give you an example, and I'm going to end it on this. If you remember Ronald Reagan, one of the first political videos that I remember that I have a very strong memory about was Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan comes on, and in the old days, they used to have like presidential address. And it was, especially one of those old TVs. And it looks old today, even if you look at it. It feels old. And Reagan is sitting at the desk, and he gives this astonishing speech where he is talking about the Iran-Contra affair. And he's like, I didn't know anything about it, but I'm the Gipper, and the buck stops with me. Have a good night. And he goes off. The reason that speech was astonishing back then was because the notion that freedom and justice, love and light America would sell weapons to Iran in order to pay Contras to go after governments that they didn't particularly like, leftist governments, Sandinistas that they didn't like. They wanted to get rid of them. It's astonishing. They were paying kill squads in South America. And Reagan effectively comes out and says, this is what we did, but I knew nothing about it. Now, Congress had even passed the Bolin Act telling Reagan, don't do that. Don't do that. No, that's a no-no. Don't do that. We don't want you to do that. And he did it anyway. And it became a scandal. Fast forward to Obama's team, and he is trying to literally destabilize the government, putting billions into it, and nobody cares. Isn't that amazing? The Overton window shifts over time to where stuff that is outlandish becomes normalized. In some cases, you benefit from it, right? It's like, oh, marijuana is legal. Yes. Oops, I'm not going to do my bong. Blacks aren't in slavery. Great. But then you get president's power expands and continues to expand to the point where in the old days, it is astonishing that America gets caught doing this. Today, it's understood and normalized. Of course, presidents knock over governments. We knocked over Ukraine. We knocked over, Honduras, taking out the guy in his pajamas. Like, it's just amazing. That's all. It's just amazing. It's how this stuff changes. Marijuana was always just a plant. Yes, it was. Agreed. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm going to say thank you. We had a damn good crowd. The day we got over 800. And I'm totaling everything, Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, over 800 people. There was a point where the show was only getting 200. So we have definitely grown. We have blown past 50,000. We're like 50,600. So we're growing. We're going at a steady clip. And it's all of you that allows me to do so. You allow me to keep the show going. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a show. So I thank you for it. I deeply appreciate you for it because this is what I do. This is my job. And you allow me to do this job. So thank you. I'm wondering if they finish. I have an interview with Rondi that's supposed to be at noon. I may push because I don't know what they are going to be doing and it's freaking me out. But I'm going to say, thanks, Ritter. Look, I have no issue with Ritter. I wish him love and light. I just disagree with his take. That's all. I wish him love and light. I don't have any issue. I made no personal attacks against Ritter at all. But look, I want to thank all of you. Shout out to each and every one of you. I want you guys to have a fantastic day. I will most likely see you. I may see you at 12. I may push Arandi because I'm worried about the construction. I also, by the way, just a heads up. And is that the day? Let me make sure that's on the calendar. Okay. There's a show called Canadian Preppers. I have to be honest with you. I've never seen this show. I did not know the show existed. But apparently, Canadian Preppers has like 4 million subs, if I remember correctly. Some astonishing amount of subs. Let me pull it up. I just want to make sure I'm not lying to you guys. The guys hit me up. I don't know. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And they was like, hey, we would love to interview you. And I was like, really? Now, I didn't know what it was. I was like, and because I didn't know what it was, and I saw the name, I was like, oh, dude. And then I looked it up. They have 3.3 million subscribers. They have 3.3 million subs. Wait. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell? I was like, why are you hitting me? You got 3 million subs. You're in Canada. How does... That's a lot of subs. And I was like, okay, fair enough. The content seems different. Like they seem to be survivalists. They seem to be into like prepping, God bless the praying prepper who's scared but prepared. Those guys. But every so often, they seem to have interviews with people who do foreign policy. And they were interested, I guess, in my show, which is fascinating to me because we just broke 50,000. So I suppose people watch. I told them yes. So tonight, I don't know the Canadian time for that, but tonight I will be on their show. I have no idea what to expect. I don't know if this is going to be a hostile interview. Hoping it's not, but we'll see. It's supposed to go for an hour or up to 2 hours, I guess, if it goes well. Wish me luck. Use their platform well. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's going to be rough being up that late, but whatever. I'll do it. I'll see. No, it's 3. I'm sorry, it's not that late. It's like 3 o'clock. Yeah, it's like 3 o'clock. No, that's wrong. It's 4 o'clock. I set my alarm for 3 o'clock, but it's 3 o'clock. So just giving you a heads up. Yeah, freedom. They're one of the freedom groups. One of the freedom groups. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. And I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Uh-oh, here we go. Favorite Trek film? Oh, that's an interesting one. It's probably going to be original series. And it may be, see, I don't know the exact one. It was the one where they were talking about the Klingon Empire crumbling in like 50 years. And Kirk was like, let them all die. Kirk was like, I don't care. Like, F those people, right? And when they found out a representative that was going to go to the Empire to help, it ended up being Spock. And them two get into this big fight over this, where Kirk is like, basically, he fought a war. And he had feelings still from the war. No, this is not very Star Trek, right? But it's a real person behaving in a real way after you fought a war with somebody. You feel some kind of way about the other person who fought that war who might have been killing your friends and all. That was Kirk's response. He was a human being, as opposed to a fake response that's imposed upon the film in order to make them act a particular way. And Spock was like, there are people who got to help. Kirk didn't feel it that way. It was just fascinating. It was that dynamic was very, that was good Trek, if that makes sense. Like, that was a good dynamic. I don't know what, I don't know if I can give you a straight answer though. I don't know what that film was. I don't remember exactly what the film was. The one with the Cleon smoke. Free Palestine from AB Canada. From Canada. All right. I'm going to end this. You guys like, share, subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. And I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one all.